Okay, well, welcome everybody. It's really great to see you or to see that you're here. And I'm Ursula Rudenberg, network manager, and I just arrived in Minnesota, hence the fish behind me. So thank you all for joining us. And this is an exciting presentation for us to record and to hear from you guys. This was actually a suggestion made by Jim Dingman, who is here kind of co-hosting this particular meeting. And Jim is from the WBAI New York community. And he really wanted to hear some of the input from the affiliate network about what is working with music programming. And I'll let Jim speak for himself beyond that. So I'm going to pass it. We have some really great presenters. We have 10, possibly 11 presenters today. And so we're going to kind of keep moving along. We do, as far as comments and questions, I think I don't want to give a hard no on that. I'm just, I do want, all of you to feel free that you can be part of this conversation. I would say, think about how much you might derail somebody's presentation with a question or comment. And if you think it's going to derail things, then wait until after the presentations, because we do want your discussion. But we have to be careful not to derail things for the sake of time. So having said all that, I'm excited to hear what you guys have to say. Thank you to everybody who has agreed to make a presentation. We really appreciate having you here. And I'm going to throw it over to Jim for a minute to introduce himself, because this is his first time at being at a round table. And I'm excited to have him meet the really, I always say, in my job, I get to work with the best people in America. And that I'm happy that he can meet some of you. So Jim, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, it is great to be here, and it's really terrific to hear from all the different folks around the country as to how they do music shows, what they think their best practices are, what they've learned over the years, how they can best raise money for their stations. I come from the station in New York, WBI Radio. I'm a director on the Pacifica National Board, and this initiative is partly a initiative from the Strategic Planning Committee of the National Board and also the Programming Committee of the National Board. Our concern with Pacifica is to essentially learn from everybody and have us all learn from each other. We've been doing initiatives like this in terms of news programming for the past couple of months. It's great to see all you guys here. Be great to have you participate, because I know we're going to learn a lot. We have some folks here from New York. Nando does a terrific Latin music show. And Ken is here. Ken does an ecological show. I guess we're going to talk about ecology and music a little bit. But I really want to shut up and listen to you guys talk and learn from you. And that's really what we're here to do. I should note that we're going to continue these kind of debates and discussions and brainstorming. I set a time for the 23rd. I'm sure Ursula will want to also do something in exploitation of all this. And we really want to learn from everybody how they're doing public affairs shows, Spanish language shows, art shows, music shows, news shows, etc., and sort of figure out how we can all, get our shit together and do a better job in terms of reaching out to people around the country. And I'm going to sit here and learn a lot from you guys. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you, Jim. And we'll hear from you later as you see fit. We're going to kind of break protocol today. Usually we have everybody introduce themselves, but because of the number of people involved, we don't, we just ask you that if you speak up at some point, and we hope you do in some form or another, for you just to give your name, your station, and your location. Just looking at who's here, I promise you the whole country is pretty much represented in terms of the West Coast, Midwest, and the East Coast, South and North. So just tell us who you are when you start. We've asked the presenters to give their presentation for about 10 minutes. And then I'll let you decide, I'm talking to you presenters now, whether you want to make time for questions or want any feedback and then we'll just move on to the next. So the first person is Samantha Hval, who is the program director at WMNF Tampa. She goes first because she has a scheduling conflict, and so we wanted to make sure she got in. And I'm going to ask you guys to, just give whatever in background is appropriate for people to understand where you're coming from. I didn't have people send in bios. Michael sent me his bio, but nobody else did. So if you can just very briefly say what you're, who you are and where you're coming from.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ursula, and everyone. This is my first time being in this meeting, in this roundtable myself. So it's really exciting to be here and just meet all of you and also learn from all of you too. So thanks. I'm going to attempt to share my screen. Let's see if I can do that. Can everyone see my screen?
Yep. Yes, ma'am.
Awesome. All right. Already a success. Great. Cool. Well, yeah. So like Ursula was saying, my name is Samantha Hval. I am from WMNF in Tampa, Florida. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about kind of these like major programming changes, or at least major for us, that we've done recently and kind of the results of that, as well as if we have time, maybe a little bit about some of the underwriting that we do with community partners around our local community. So
bye. Have a good one. Talk to you later.
Oh, just a reminder to mute if you are not talking.
All right, let's see here. So first, a little bit about MNF. So we are right in the Tampa Bay area. You can see from our map that we cover multiple counties, but specifically our listeners are mainly in Pinellas and Hillsborough. But yeah, we get about 100,000 listeners on a weekly basis. The majority of our listeners are college graduates, leaning a little bit male at the moment, leaning left politically, and I'll get to age later. But also something that's really cool and why we do underwriting at our station is because we find that a lot of our listeners trust us. And since we are a community radio station, our listeners want to support local businesses and local nonprofits. So it's kind of like this win-win for everybody. We find when we have underwriting, we can highlight those businesses and then our listeners get to know them and support them. So, but first, the program changes that we went through. So a little bit about me is I was born and raised here, but I went to WERS in Boston for school. And then I went to WNCS in Vermont for 3 years. And then when the pandemic hit, I moved back home and got involved with WMNF in nonprofit. So when I came, and this is around February 2021, this is what our current schedule looked like. Like a lot of different public radio stations, block programming is still our schedule. All of our volunteers are once a week, or all of our DJs and hosts are volunteers who come in once a week. And while on one hand, it's really great because that means that every single person from the community can come in, give their expertise on their music genre and really represent the community. I felt like the way that our schedule was just not as cohesive or maybe built for flow as best as it could have been. For example, at the top, we have a show that goes from, it's a body rock, it's punk, disco, and heavy metal going into then grassroots Americana type of music. So a little bit of a major shift in genres, right? So I was discussing this with our general manager. I thought to myself, well, if there's a way we can keep the diversity of sound, but also configure in a way where we can not only maintain listeners for longer listening time for flow, but also try to attract new listeners by letting the schedule be easier to look at, kind of discern where certain shows are, find certain shows easier, maybe that can help. So what we ended up doing was this. So it's a little bit broken up, and it might be a little hard to see, but basically you can tell by the colors that what we try to do was that 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., generally Monday through Friday, besides our news and public affairs block, those shows we said you can still pick out the same, you can still pick out your own music and you still have that complete freedom, but we gave them a little bit of parameters to work within so that each hour and each DJ had that same consistent mix of music, but it wasn't a complete departure hour to hour or even show to show. And then we also, for the evening specifically, we grouped them up into different strips. So Monday nights is blues night, Wednesday night is Latin night, our Fridays are R&B soul groove nights, just to make it a little bit easier for new listeners to find what genres they can find where, as well as we configured the schedule so that one show next to the other wasn't a complete departure in genre, but they complement each other, and that there was flow and hopefully therefore longer listening time. And we found that, you know, and this, the graphics are a little fuzzy, so I apologize, but we found that we did get some interesting numbers back, which we got a little bit of a dip in overall listenership. These are our streaming numbers. And that's just, we know, is because of, we made some big changes, and sometimes with changes you lose some people, but we do believe that we're coming back. And you'll see that before, our main listenership was 55 to 65 plus. And now a year later, our main listenership is 35 to 64. So we're already kind of making a shift in age demographic, as well as you'll see too that there is more longer listening time overall in general. You'll see that, like, for example, I think, yeah, Sundays is getting more listeners overall, Friday nights, even Saturday nights too. Even our weekday morning programs at 6 a.m. is getting like more listeners, like starting to come in. So like we're seeing some positive stuff happening, even though overall we're still trying to gain back those numbers. We think that we are kind of slowly getting some of those core listeners back, getting used to the changes that we made, as well as attracting some new ones too. And just to include it super quickly, this is another schedule, but this is what we do for our underwriting. So based on day part, it's priced differently, of course. So our most popular daytime is the daytime, like basically 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. when people are going into work or leaving work, tuning in. Or we also find our Saturday days are doing really well as well. So those are priced the most expensive. However, we do have a discount for nonprofits because we want to give some love back to our community and make sure that it's affordable for nonprofits, since we're a nonprofit. And essentially for underwriting, I also have some copy examples too of what we give people who want to work with us in the community. We tell them, of course, that you can't do any calls to action. We are a nonprofit. We do have rules, but you can definitely kind of lead your horse to water, where you can say, here's the product, here's what we think is cool about it. If you want to learn more, you can go to this website. No pressure. If you do, great. If you don't, all good. No pressure that way. But yeah, I wanted to keep things short. So that's basically what I have, but I'm definitely open to questions if we have time. I didn't time myself as I planned. So I don't know how much time I've taken up, but thank you.
What do you think, Ursula? Should we allow a couple questions or?
You're mute, Ursula. You're still mute. You try
Okay.
signing.
There you go.
Okay. It's the choice of the presenter.
Okay.
Sure.
Does anyone have any questions?
I do.
I love. Go ahead.
Oh, hi, I'm Marcus with KURU in Silver City, New Mexico. I was just curious, what is your structure for pricing for how you're charging people for underwriting? Is it thought it looked like a bulk kind of thing?
Sorry, Marcus, I believe I don't know if something's going on with maybe my volume. I believe you asked about pricing for our underwriting, like what do we offer?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if I'm actually going back into my presentation here, because I went really quickly on the slide. For our most popular daytime parts, for for-profit businesses, it's $75 per announcement. For nonprofit, it's $40. But then when you go into evenings, it's $50 and $30. And then for overnights, like early morning times and also Sundays, it's $30 and $20.
her announcement?
I believe so. Yes.
Oh,
Yeah,
Thank
that's, I've heard that in other, I mean, in large metropolitan areas. That's pretty standard.
Yeah, our development director, Laura, she priced everything and has all that good information that she gave me for this presentation. So thanks, Laura.
I see we have a question from Felix and then Sharon.
Hi, all. Thanks so much for that, Samantha. I was just wondering where you got the demographic information. Is that from your stream provider or where is that coming in from?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. We've actually been having a lot of success with Google Analytics, believe it or not. We use that a lot with our streaming numbers, and Google has actually been giving us a lot of great demographic information. Basically, yeah, age, gender, and definitely like interests as well, such as education level. We find that travel and leisure is a huge one, maybe because we are a tourist area. Also reading, we found a lot of book lovers for our listeners too, as well as listening to the radio. But yeah, Google Analytics has been really great.
So that's based on IP, from the IP address to Google Analytics. Interesting. Thanks.
Totally.
Okay, Sharon.
Hi, thanks. This is really interesting. Thank you so much for your time. I had a question. When you did the change to the more block format, were you able to maintain all of the radio shows that you had on the schedule and get them to sort of adapt their show to fit that block? And I guess the second part of that was, were they able to keep their like show titles, or did it kind of have to become, something new altogether? Thank you.
Absolutely. No, fantastic question. What we found was that we were able to keep the majority of shows on the new schedule, just in a different place. I mean, it was a pretty arduous task. I met with every single volunteer DJ, had a meeting, got their availability and their schedule, and then kind of puzzle piece the whole on-air schedule together to see where I could fit everybody, but also in a cohesive way. Somehow it worked. And it happened that what was great is that when we did the block programming, especially for the evenings, it just so happened that we already had these really fantastic shows. They were just super spread out throughout the entire week. So it's like, well, let's put them all in one place so at least listeners, especially new listeners, know where to find them. And if in particular they really like that genre, they can stick around for the whole evening. And that actually really worked out well, in particular with our Latin nights. We had a local Latin restaurant named Red Mesa, who, when they heard that we were making this change, decided to underwrite Wednesday Latin nights. And we got actually some great sponsorship through that as well. So it's kind of like a double hitter. And majority of shows were able to keep their name. The only ones that we changed were actually the daytime 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. We're still kind of testing that out. Right now, it's just WMNF. And then the DJ is just, hey, I'm Sam on WMNF. But it used to be morning show, it's the music, noon to 3, and then traffic jam 3 to 6. So we're still testing out whether that was a beneficial move or not. The majority of shows were able to keep their name. So, thank you.
Okay, that's weird.
If everyone mutes for a heartbeat and then appropriately unmutes, it'll stop doing that. That happens periodically on Zoom.
Oh, okay, good to know.
Okay, I'm gonna move things along if that's okay, because
Yeah, let's go.
I'm keeping my eye on the clock here, and so
Thank
I'm
you
gonna
very
introduce.
much.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you,
so much,
Samantha.
Okay, next we have Sybil Augustine. She's the music director at WORT, Madison, Wisconsin. And Sybil, you're on.
All right, thanks
Okay.
for inviting
All right.
me to come and be a part of this. And so I've been at WRT a long time, and we've been around a long time. WRT was founded in 1975. Lorenzo Malam, who, most people know, and if you don't, got to read Sex and Broadcasting, was one of the folks who helped found the station in 1975. And some of our early staff included David LePage, and they talked about having an organization for community radio, which evolved into National Federation for Community Broadcasters. So yeah, there's a lot of history here, and I started this job in 1995. We're unusual in that we're a staff cooperative. We have 7 staff people. We had 6 up until the pandemic, but the way that things shook out was so much digital production, we ended up promoting my assistant to be full-time in charge of digital audio production. And it's hopefully, or it is going to be, moving into managing video and audio production together. And so otherwise we have a news director, we have a listener sponsor development director, we have an events and business underwriting director, we have a volunteer and outreach coordinator. People have these hyphenated titles. And we have an IT director, and then a few part-time people, but we're the ones that mostly manage the station as a collective. We don't have a general manager. We answer to the board of directors, to each other, to the listeners. So it's definitely a very interesting place to work, and things are really different than a lot of places. We have a lot of autonomy within our departments to make decisions. And then, we have to work closely with other staff members on a lot of really important things that we need to do and on overall vision. We have a programming committee that is, somewhat advisory, and it's been real difficult to, really make their role be more effective. So again, it mostly comes down to me as the music director and the news director. And about 80% of our programming is music versus about 20% news. It's kind of equal between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m., but then it's all music weekdays, but then it's all music between 8 p.m. and 8 p.m. and 8 a.m. weekdays and all through the weekends. So that's a little background on what our station is about, and that there's so much music here, and it's really pretty much in nearly every genre. I mean, we have gospel shows, we have women's shows, we have hip hop shows, we have oldies, pop music, just really, really ranges in so many different ways. So I've got a little presentation too. Let me get that going, and let's see, can I just make this big? Actually, make the presentation. Okay. Let's see. I don't know if I need to publish it. I just want to see it. No, I don't want to see all this other stuff on my page. That's all. Okay. Okay, well, let me give this a try. I'm not sure. Are you all seeing a presentation at all?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Why can't I see it the way you guys do? Okay. Well, anyway, that's just the cover page there, and just introduction. I just thought I would let's see. Okay, here's where I want to start. It doesn't seem to really be in the right order. Okay, so what I've discovered is the host personalities and their on-air demeanor. It's a huge part of why people choose radio. We have so many other ways to listen now, of course, Spotify, Pandora, iTunes. There's so much competition. why should people listen to radio? Well, it's because you have hosts who are interesting, knowledgeable, passionate, and they're not preachy or like awkward, super awkward and shy, or just going on and on, you know, and don't know when to stop, or incoherent and rambling. You know, they've got a very distinct personality and have a warm, you know, inviting presence, and that, you know, really makes a lot of difference. So what I always look for when I'm, you know, I've hired a lot of people that don't have radio experience. You know, if they have the knowledge and the passion for the music, that's something that they bring, you know, that you can't teach, then you can't buy, you know, they've got it, but you can teach them how to run equipment and do anything else. It's, you know, that's the focus. And then, you know, they have to have a sense of self-importance, self-insurance, assurance, and confidence without appearing to be too egotistical. You know, if you don't have self-confidence and self-assurance, I've had a few of those hosts in the past, it's really hard to build that up, you know, just that you don't jump to a judgment on that too quickly, but you can sense that they just don't really feel good about talking in front of people. You know, they just want to play the music. That's really not going to be, for your high profile shows, it's not going to be good, because it's hard to bring people out of that shell if they're just not able to warm up to talking. You know, they've got to be connecting to the person as well as the music for the best, most successful shows. Of course, there's many shows, and it's not necessarily an issue for the show in the middle of the night. So, yeah, I mean, you know, some like would get a comment about somebody just like, oh, I love their awkward charm. So, you know, when I say awkward, it's just, you know, it's sort of subjective, but, you know, just needs to not be something where they just don't seem like they know what they're doing. You know, I feel it's disrespectful to the audience to be unprepared, to sound very unsure of yourself, be super self-effacing. But when people do make fun of themselves a little bit and they're not too, you know, egotistical, or they joke about being awkward, that does, you know, charm the audience. So, you know, that's a tricky part, is to cultivate the personalities, you know, but when you continue to talk to them about the music and remind them to just think about what they're sharing with the listener, that really helps to take that away. I know I'm missing something here, because I just, you know, I thought I would just, you know, off the wall do something I never did, which is make this these sheets. So let's see. No, I think I've got the right thing. Sorry. So for us, it was important to see all of our shows in a genre or a programming strip as a whole. I haven't brought up the schedule, but we have classical music 5 to 8 Monday through Friday. We have folk and international, which includes country, bluegrass specialty shows from 9 to noon Monday through Friday. And then we have different types of jazz from 2 to 5 Monday through Thursday. And Friday's always been an anomaly, where it's more of a variety show. There's a lot of rock, and that can include folk, singer, songwriter, just about any genre, because a lot of times when people would come into the studio and do live performances, or you know, whether it's live or on the phone, do interviews, because of all the stuff going on over the weekend. So so that show is more eclectic by that nature. And then it's generally mostly rock after 8 p.m., but there's different flavors every night. And one of the things I did when I came here is to try to look at it and arrange it to where there was a flow to keep people listening, because in my experience, people kind of have a routine. Most people, the majority of people have a routine. You know, they do such and such in the morning, and that's just the time that they go to work, or, you know, get to work at home. Then, you know, they have lunch at a certain time, and they do such and such in the afternoons, and then that's how their routine goes. But then at night, you have a lot of choices. Sometimes people have nights at home. Sometimes they've got a volunteer work. They're out doing something. They're meeting. They're having company. They go out. So at night, we have programming that keeps people tuned in at the same time every day across the board. And at night, it's more like holding on to that audience. So we have an electronic show that goes into electronic and industrial music, and then it's followed by a metal show, so that leads up to the heavy music. And we have indie rock on Tuesdays, and there's several shows like that flow together. And then on Wednesdays, we have more, there's classic rock, and there used to be a Grateful Dead show in there. There's a lot of live recorded music in there. And then on Thursdays, we call it Thursday Night Strange. It's when my show is on, and it's indie rock, it's archival rock, it's also eclectic freeform music of all different kinds, and it's just wild, strange, comedic, provocative, and that follows through on the other shows after that. So and then our Saturdays are very successful. They go from soul to jazz, and then there's international music, a lot reggae, African, and Latin music that flows through, and then a couple of more flagship shows, oldies and blues types of shows. So there's across this programming strips and the shows that are in the same genres, we want to have a variety, but a little bit of cohesion. If you have a super far out avant-garde show among the jazz shows, it kind of affects the hosts in the other genre. So it's good. I found that it's good to be consistent with that. And now let's get into the monetizing. I think that is, I'm ready to go there. Let's see. So some of the things about music programming, well, it's really hard with all the competition going on. Syndicated programming is mostly free, so it's hard to monetize, like, oh, we're gonna, this is such a great show, we should sell it and make money. Well, that's difficult in my experience. And then if you try to have podcasts, it's really expensive to license. You don't want to do that. Our local underwriters, and we only accept local underwriters and local business sponsors. And, you have to work with them to find their favorite shows and, to try to sell them on the programming that would fit with their audience. Some of the other ways, these are the tools that we have to monetize programming, pledge drives, of course, and a few things that that enhance it for us is we really cut back on all kinds of different premiums. So people do like to pledge to get tickets. And then people started, when social media started to get big, people were like, oh, I want to do a Facebook fundraiser. I want to do a Facebook fundraiser. But there are issues with that in the sense that it's easier to spread the word, and you can make goals and so on with it. But it's difficult for the station. Just bear in mind that you're not going to get the money right away. They might take some of the money out if you do a Facebook or third-party fundraiser, and then you don't have the contact info to thank the donors that donated that way, and get them into your database and try to solicit them for the future. So we're looking at ways to try to allow people to do the Facebook fundraisers because they're easy and fun, and you can walk into the studio with a bunch of money in your hand, but also we want to have those other benefits. We have had special events where our hosts are doing, we'll speak, talk about their history and their shows, and if they're musicians, they can perform. So we've done a few of those. We've had remotes like for World Radio Day during a popular show, and everybody came down because they wanted to see that host, and they donated during that event. So and also the sponsor was a bar and gave us a portion of the proceeds. So that was a way to make money. We have a sound system, a PA, and we hire that out, and you can hire out a DJ, or you can just rent the PA, but that brings in some money. And then grants, it's been a little tough, but we've got money here and there sometimes to archive programming or to digitize music for more storage. and for studio equipment and upgrades for our live audio and for video sessions. And then finally, let's see. You can have live music in the studio, and you could invite major donors and sponsors and potential funders to sit with you in the studio audience. And then we put together an archive of that live and studio music or stuff we recorded from remote broadcasts, things that nobody else has. And we're looking at having a section on our website that's only accessible via password, so that, you know, when you have a membership, when you make donation, then you're able to get that as an extra benefit and get to the music vault of rare recordings. And we've been doing some working with partners at live concert events, especially since we're not doing live music in studio. WORT is still actually closed to the public, and DJs are not allowed to have live guests or news programming. Nobody is, all the interviews are live or on the phone or via Zoom. You have to be a volunteer to come into the station. And we're probably the only other place besides hospitals in Madison that requires masks at all times. So that's making that tough. But anyway, we're doing all the live stuff outside of the station. So we work with partners at events, and we invite to try to set up where we can say, hey, can we, you know, that we're sponsoring. If we're sponsoring, we can say, hey, can we get this band to do a meet and greet with our major donors, you know, before or after the show. And yeah, we've talked about genre-based fundraising in terms of just fundraising around, you know, certain genre at a time. Maybe, you know, maybe do it like a regular pledge drive for a week, or have some other approach. Doing more live remotes or special programming during our fund drives, because, you know, my conclusion is that pledge drives have been the best way to raise the most money with our music shows. It raises at least 80% of our budget and pretty much keeps the station going. So I think that's all I have. Is that, hope it's helpful. Anybody got questions?
Yeah, thank you, Sybil. Jim, you had 2 questions. Do you want to address them to Sybil?
Excuse me, Sybil gave a really fantastic overview of the different aspects of monetization, which I really found very useful to listen to. And I just wanted to ask her, like, what, you know, you obviously have an evolution of these music shows in relationship to their communities. And you have all these different best practices, if you will. You know, talked about doing gigs with local bars, etc. And then you get to a pledge drive. So I'm wondering just if you could share with us, you know, how's that accumulation like help you raise the money during the pledge drive? I mean, does it, you know, because it's just not the show itself being on there, but it's all this build up with all the different things they're doing. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are about that.
Yes, it does help. What more can I say? Well, I really try to get the on-air hosts themselves out there, but also have some staff people there, because what happens is people, you know, they want to, I'm sure you all know that they want to put the face to the name if they can, and they'll recognize your voice, you know, and so on. But they want to come up and talk to you, and you've got to be there to, you know, to welcome them and say, well, hello, you know, sure. And just listen to what it is they have to say. And, you know, I when I go to these things, I don't expect to really have fun. I'm just prepared the whole time for people to just come up and talk to you and go, well, I want to tell you this, or this is really great, or I don't like that. You know, during the pandemic, when it had to be all remote and I've had everything forwarded to my phone, so many comments, so many people calling, you know, they love this, I hate that. But anyway, you know, they make that personal connection, and, you know, whether they've already been giving or whether they, you know, have just been a listener or haven't given much or given much thought, it really changes the relationship for them to see you and talk to you in person, you know. And even if they don't get to meet you, but I think it's really important to make that time to have the one-on-ones with individuals and listen to what they have to say, whether, you know, it's a compliment or a more of a criticism. And, you know, it's we have a great volunteer and outreach director who just came in with a bunch of stuff. So, you know, we have all kinds of things, these little booklets for volunteers and, you know, lots and lots of the stickers. And, you know, the program guide has got really a lot of detail about what the different programs are, because, you know, otherwise you just have a name and it's this huge patchwork of programming. So, you know, they have questions, and, you know, that's the best way to connect with them. And trying to think if there was anything besides that we were talking about besides just getting out there with the live remotes and the special events. Just that, you know, people see our name on stuff and they just, you know, just keep it. It's just like a pledge drive message. It's got to be over and over and over to really sink in. And so, you know, get a cool design, you know, have all the information you need in there, but, you know, don't make it, you know, make it easy to read and streamline it. And, you know, just be there for people, be available and accessible.
Yeah, thanks, Sybil. Fantastic.
I hope they answer your
It'd be
question.
great if everybody could make the PowerPoints they're doing available to all of us. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I actually can share that, you know, or it's in the recording too, but it was sort of not really great finish, but let me know. All right, thanks.
Thank you, Sybil. We could do a whole roundtable just on the literature that WORT produces, because it's really, really beautiful. Okay, so I'm gonna thank you, Sybil. Really appreciate it.
Yeah,
I'm gonna
thanks.
move right
Anytime.
on to Mike. Is it Lytle or Little?
Mike Lytle.
Lytle. Okay. Station manager at KKFI, Kansas City, Missouri. Mike, take it away.
Thank you. I'll try to keep this brief because as station manager, I've seen things from a different perspective than what a program director can. My experience at KKFI has been over 20 years. We've been there over 30, and we've been fairly successful for a non-commercial radio station, 100,000 watts. And in the time that I've been there, I've seen us prosper most of the time. The problem is we're aging out. And I want to bring that to this discussion in that we have painted ourselves into a corner by having great support during our pledge drives. We have 3 a year. We do some underwriting. It's been pretty successful. We've got very nice facilities. We're lucky to have that going for us, and great equipment. The problem is because we put ourselves into this situation where we have older DJs, all of which are totally volunteers. Our listenership is getting older, our DJs are getting older, and we're not backfilling with younger people. And hearing Samantha talk about how they've got a younger audience and probably younger DJs, I'm very envious in that I've been working for these last 10 years trying to get our people to listen to how do we get younger? Because eventually the gravy train runs out and your listeners, I hate to say it, die off, move away, whatever. And we are totally unprepared for that. At the same time, we're very successful in mining those listeners and being very profitable during our 3 pledge drives a year. We make over, last I checked, like 70,000 per pledge drive. And it's very driven by the eclectic nature of our shows. Much like these other 2 stations, we have a very wide range of music and talk. It's like an 80-20 break of music to talk. And it's very different than every station in Kansas City, maybe even in the Midwest. In fact, I'll say, paraphrasing our mission statement, to give the listener something they can't get anywhere else and serve the underserved. And with that mindset, we do attract our share of good listenership. But I bring up the problems we're running into because I wanted to make sure that everyone was aware that if you continue down the road that's successful, sometimes that road ends, especially if you're not prepared for that road ending. And so that's the dilemma that we're running into. But when it comes down to it, the bottom line I wanted to share with you all that we find successful is trying to make sure that every show that's on the air with KKFI is a quality show in every respect. And if it's not, we work with them to try to make them the best that they can be. And that's really the summation that I can give you is that when a good show is there, the people will come and they will listen. So that's really all I have to express to you. Any questions?
Looks like Jim has a question.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. I'm just curious in general with everybody here, how many folks are actually bringing Gen Z DJs into the mix and training them? I'm just curious about that. I'm just curious how you're approaching that, Mike. Is that baby boomer versus Gen Z situation is the big dilemma?
What's interesting is I was just going to mention, I'm also the primary trainer at our station. I have been for 20 years. And I've seen this disconnect as people come in and start to train and become certified, because we don't have a lot of openings in our schedule on a regular basis. They literally end up leaving before we can get them on the air 80% of the time. And that goes to what I was talking about an older staff, an older on-air list of DJs, because they feel very tied to their time slots.
Mm-hmm.
And it's difficult to bring them out of those time slots, especially when they're successful during the pledge drives. And so it's a catch-22 for us in that we can't really bring in new people very easily. It's literally like pulling teeth, trying to get young people involved in our station. And that's what we're wrestling with right now. But the answer is we train them in a very one-on-one basis. And I'm the primary trainer during that. And it takes typically 6 months. I hope that answers your question.
But Mr. Lytle, do you actually have non-air staffers or long-time staffers? And let me correct myself. I'm losing my question. That how much of your staff, the ones who are involved in teaching and training and stuff like that, and also the decisions of the station, how many of them are of those generations themselves or the one right before it?
Next to none of our people are younger, if that answers your question. But we have, just to break it down, we've got close to 100 on-air personalities, all volunteers. We've got 4 staff people that are paid behind the scenes. And the training that we do is not really set up to train any certain age group or generation. It's whoever comes walking in the door, sadly, because whoever shows up, we're so desperate to have bodies that we try to make it work somehow, some way. Yeah, and if they're a C caliber individual on air, we can live with it because we just need that much help. That's the dilemma that we've run into.
I have a problem. I'm over at WUSB. I'm not an officer or anything, but I came in on this, but WUSB Stony Brook, New York. And of course, we have the advantage of having a very large university. And we actually still get a reasonable amount of younger people volunteering for this. And one of the problems over the years has been once they come in, we never utilize them for anything other than air. And so they're all waiting for air shifts and they eventually move on. But what we really need are people who are making decisions that way. Fortunately, we have rules that say that the official program director, music director, and business manager have to be students. And that at least forces the issue of having actual students involved because they end up being in charge. They're not the station manager, but they run the actual affairs of the on-air station. And so that's an automatic, but the thing is, then you have the quality problem in that if those people start losing their steam, then everything starts to drift and nothing, and the station heads nowhere. And Also, if they have their grades suddenly drop off and have to pay their attention to that instead of helping making decisions about raising money, having which people are on the air, whether we want to emphasize a certain thing. We do recruiting at the very beginning of each semester. I wish we had more all year, but that's what we get, is the beginning of the semester when students start to come here. And so we have a number of students on air and some students on staff. I can't say it's worked out great, but it's worked out, which for many stations I know, it's not working out anymore. And
that's what we're worried about. Is getting to that point where we've aged out so much that we start losing our high quality people for whatever reason, and we don't have anybody to backfill, especially younger people. So
well, especially college stations have a way to lessen that. I do not know how to do it for a community station.
Good points.
We have a number of other questions. Mike, can you take a few more questions real briefly? Okay, we had somebody ask for how do you train your DJs and how do you certify them?
Our version is literally homegrown because most of our people can't spend very much time at the station. So everybody does bits and pieces. In fact, I've got 3 or 4 junior trainers who work under me who are all very experienced. So we share the load as far as how we train. Our primary way is to set them up in a production room where the facilities are almost identical to our on-air booth, and then have them literally just practice doing their show in there on a very regular basis. Our target is 6 months normally. And then also have them study our manual. Written test comes at the end of that. And then also watching and observing some of our more experienced people. And in those 3 ways, they typically learn enough to get proficient. Again, it's not the ultimate to me, because if we ran this like a school or university, a classroom or something, we'd have them need to get an A before they were allowed to be on the air. And we've evolved into a situation where just get them to minimal standards to where at least they're functional on the air, and we'll live with it because we're so desperate for the on-air help. So that's the dilemma that we're in. But again, that's how we do it.
Okay, and then there's another question here, which is kind of a Pandora's box. So I'm wondering if you can answer it with 1 or 2 sentences before we move on. What is the management structure and the governance structure? Can you paraphrase that very briefly?
You say our governance?
What is the governance and management structure?
Yes, we have a board of directors, all volunteers. We have an active member group that elects the board of directors. We've got 15 different committees, all of which are total volunteers. Again, it's tough to make that all work with that many moving parts of volunteers. Luckily, we have a volunteer coordinator. And essentially, it's a lot of moving parts that we try to keep organized and working together. But that's how we work.
And Sybil, you want to ask your question real quick? I don't actually understand what you're asking.
I didn't have a question.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I see
good.
that Michael White and Felix had their hands raised. I don't know if you want to have them put theirs in the chat for as we go along, or ask that out loud.
Well, try doing it real fast where I'm kind of want to move on, but
yeah. Michael White.
Yes.
I have a real quick suggestion, and that is that if you want to build a cadre of younger producers, set aside a time on your schedule, maybe not the most frequently listened to time, and reserve that for younger, newer people, and build a cadre and just fill that. So you never know what you're going to get that week. You've got some people you can plug in if you need to, but dedicate some time for your new people and get them motivated to do it. And with that, I'll shut up.
Good thoughts. Thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to chime in with something pretty similar. We started a program several, 5, 6 years ago now. We called the Youth Radio Project. We go actually for high school kids mostly, and we have a teacher who's got a background check and everything, who works with the kids and gets them trained up. And now, a few years in, we're actually seeing some of those folks coming back, albeit sometimes just during summer times when they're, now that they're in college, they're coming back, but they're some of them are now regular DJs. And so that's been great, and a little bit of a pipeline for much younger DJs as well as listeners, because those shows are fairly popular. I do want to just, my other question was for the last presenter, but it could be kind of for anybody, and it's a little bit around fundraising and the fund drives. And just I was really impressed with some of the success that Mike just described there in Kansas City, and just any advice on building, dedicated listenership to certain shows and having that really show in the fund drives. And with that, I'll mute myself.
Okay, thank you. And I also, Mike, KYGT in Colorado recently called up and said they would like to have a whole roundtable dedicated to that topic of how to bring in the next generation of listeners. So, we'll be probably asking you to come back to talk this over at another roundtable, and the rest of you in this roundtable right now, if you feel you would like to discuss that further, let me know. And yes, that includes you, Sharon, having had a lot of success in that area. So anyway, that's going to come down the pike. So we're going to move on to Alan Bloom. We're switching gears a little bit here to a music producer instead of a manager. We have just a few music producers here presenting. So Alan Bloom is from a show which I personally love. We brought it onto KHOI here in Ames, and it's a syndicated Spanish-English music program called Classical Tones from KBBF, Santa Rosa, California. Alan, you want to take it away?
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. I'm with KBBF. The BBF stands for Bilingual Broadcasting Foundation. It's the oldest bilingual community radio station in the country. The foundation started in 1971. We went on the air in 1973 and have been on the air continuously since then. One comment about the previous conversation that I hadn't thought of is in the early days of KBBF, we managed to train up a lot of announcers. And then once they got trained up, they'd quit and go off and start working at a commercial radio station. So KBBF ended up training announcers for a lot of the Spanish language stations back in the 70s. Right now, we're trying to do more community affairs programming and news, but there still is a lot of music. In particular, my show is a classical music show, but by the way, my background is I was the producer and the technical guy for WESU, which is a radio station of Wesleyan University about 50 years ago. And then one summer I worked as a professional announcer at my hometown station of WGET. And then I wasn't involved in broadcasting for many years until a few years ago. I got involved with KBBF. I got started just to kind of practice my Spanish, and it kind of snowballed from there. So my show is called Classical Tones. And I think I was thinking that there's basically, if you define success as getting a lot of other stations to pick up the show on audio port, which is kind of what happened, then I think there's three keys to success. One is longevity. You have to be uploading your show for a long period of time. It starts out, nobody else is going to be uploading it. But if you do it like a once weekly show like mine and do it reliably, eventually you'll get people starting to pick it up. So that's the first point. The second point is having interesting content, and I'll talk about that. And then the third point is having good production values. I think that's especially important for a classical music show. So let me start off with the longevity and reliability of uploading the show. When you first start uploading it, it's going to take time for other stations to start carrying the program. Classical Tones actually started as an on-air show back in 2012. And then in 2017, I started pre-recording it. and uploading it to AudioPort. And as I say, there was very little intake at first. It took some time to catch on. Today, in addition to KBBF itself, there's about a dozen stations that seem to be uploading the show every week manually, plus 3 more that do it automatically, apparently for podcasts. So it looks like there's about 16 stations carrying the show right now. And I do want to point out that reliability is very important. If you start missing shows or posting them late, then you're going to start losing your customers. The second point is interesting content. Each show, I think, needs to kind of have a hook. I mean, there's lots of classical music shows on the air, but the trick about classical tones is that each piece has some kind of Latin connection. Our tagline is classical music with a Latin connection. So all the music has some connection to either Spain or Latin America, typically the composer or the performers or some other connection, like Aaron Copland wrote a piece called El Salón Mexico. So there's the Latin connection. So that it was kind of interesting when I first started doing the show. The most fun part of it was doing the research. I've been a classical music fan all my life, but when I started doing the show, I started researching Latin American classical music composers and Spanish classical music composers. And there's a lot of them out there that I had never heard of who wrote some wonderful music. And I was able to highlight that on my show. A lot of the music is stuff that you rarely hear on other classical music stations. Each piece is preceded by a minute or so of anecdotes and other information, first in Spanish and then in English. And when you do that kind of thing, I remember back when I was in college, I had a classical music show, and I was told, don't just get on there and read the liner notes. That's really boring. You need to do some research and come up with some interesting stuff to say about it. And that's what I've tried to do. Publicity, you need to publicize the show somehow. And the only way I've done that is on AudioPort itself. The program story, the description of the program which is the same every week. I post in the notes section of the upload, and then the advertising the particular show of that week is done in the summary section. And then I also upload a script every week. Since my show is scripted, I read a script in Spanish and English. I upload that to AudioPort every week. I don't know if any of the stations are using it. And I also upload a link to the Spinitron data, because I figure out the times and all that information for Spinitron. And since I have to do it for my own station, I upload that data to Dropbox, and so people can download it, and all they have to do is change the start time and they can reuse the data. Again, I'm not sure if anybody's actually using it, but I've been doing that every week. And the final thing that I think is important, especially for a classical music show, is having good production values. I don't consider myself the world's best announcer, but Audacity is your friend. I guess everybody knows what Audacity is. It's a free program for editing sound files. So what I do is, the trick is to listen carefully to each voice segment that I have recorded. And it's really nice. If I make a mistake, it's really easy to re-record it, and you can edit out clicks and pops and noise. I use Audacity's noise reduction feature just to reduce the background noise, since I'm just recording this at my home. So there is a fair amount of background noise, and Audacity does a pretty good job of getting rid of that. I do use a modest amount of compression on the voice parts to keep the volume level kind of constant. And the other thing I do is, classical music has quiet passages. And if a particular piece ends in a quiet passage, I don't want the announcing voice to come on at full volume because it sounds like you're screaming. So I use Audacity to kind of vary the volume so that it corresponds with the particular music. That would be less of an issue with popular music, because most popular music kind of plays at a constant volume throughout the entire song. But for classical music, that's kind of important. Another point is, and I learned this years ago, in the early days of radio, the announcers talked like this. We were told to talk from your diaphragm. And I kind of think that's a bad idea. It sounds fake. I think it's much better just to sound natural. Another thing about announcing is rhythm and cadence. Part of that's just the way you record it. And then also the time delay between your announcement and the start of the music and so on, you can easily adjust that with AudioPort. So the trick is to listen and kind of make it so that it sounds good, make it so that it sounds reasonable. And the only last point, by the way, I'm an engineer, so I kind of obsess about the technical aspects, so forgive me for that. The final point was people really obsess about microphones. They figure you got to spend thousands of dollars on a microphone to get something that sounds good. And in my opinion, what's much more important than the microphone is the room acoustics. You don't want to be able to hear the room, so to speak. And there's a whole, you could go on for hours talking about that, but I don't be afraid to use an inexpensive mic. The mic I use is an old Radio Shack boom mic that I think I paid $35 for or something many years ago. And people are astonished when they find out what I'm using because it sounds like a professional microphone. So again, you can use Audacity to vary the equalization and that kind of thing if you have an inexpensive mic, so don't worry about that. So that's pretty much all I had that I was going to present. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you, Val. There is a question from Robert. What are ways to train for quality in live shows? Do you have a comment about that?
Yeah, we have a regular training program that our program director does. I don't remember how many hours it is. That is a good idea to have an hour where you have beginning announcers, probably late at night where you're not going to lose too many listeners. My show is actually fairly late at night, mainly just because we figured that classical music is not the most popular thing. But yeah, I don't know what the details are about announcing. They do have a whole session on Audacity, so you can, for producing your own show. And announcing, yeah, we have a whole regular training program for that, but I'm not exactly sure what it involves.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Alan, thank you. And
there was a question from Jim too.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, thank you, Alan. Really interesting. I went to Wesleyan too, so it's sort of fun to hear somebody talk about that. I'm just curious your thoughts about classical music because, and it's amazing to hear a Latin connection to classical music. That was really interesting. But how do you see classical music in general? What can we do to take advantage of the fact that there are still millions of people who love to listen to classical music in the United States? And it seems that, as you know, I'm a New Yorker, so I've watched the stations disappear. I remember when NCN disappeared years ago, and there's only QXR left. But what do you think we can do? What can be done to make classical music shows more interesting in general?
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. There used to be 2 commercial classical music stations in San Francisco when I first moved there in 1979. One of them changed formats, and then the other, when the station decided to change formats, they kept the classical aspect of it and made it a nonprofit community station. I think there's still a lot of classical music listeners out there, but part of the problem is it's all kind of old music. So most of the listeners already have their own music collection. So I think one of the things I do in my show is try to present music that I think a lot of classical music listeners are not familiar with, because there's a lot of this outstanding music out there that doesn't normally get played. So I think maybe that's the key, is to have a hook like I do, Latin music with a Latin connection, so that you can play some stuff that people aren't used to listening to. And as I say, I give a little bit of interesting information about each piece before I play it, which is something that you don't get on just Spotify.
Okay, thank you.
By the way, I'm going to have to leave. I got something that came up, so I would like. This is a great program, and I'd like to listen to the other presenters, but I'm afraid I'm going to have to leave.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Alan. Thank you.
Thanks.
And I'm going to, my apologies to Indra. I'm going to jump for a minute to Grant because he has to leave in a few minutes, if that's okay, and allow him to speak now, and then we'll go back to our regular schedule. So Grant, you want to go ahead? I know you have to leave very shortly.
Appreciate that, Ursula. And sorry, Indra, for jumping the line. But hi, everyone. My name is Grant Parks. I'm the general manager at KZFR 90.1 FM in Chico. We've been having a lot of music programming on since the very beginning of the station. We've been broadcasting for 32 years, and the majority of the time we've had more music shows than we have had talk shows, not for necessarily lack of wanting news and public affairs shows, but as we see over the trend of a long time, it's more difficult to actually keep news and public affairs programmers than it is to keep music programmers. Some of that is attributed to sometimes the research that goes into producing a news and public affairs program. So we'll talk about that later on in the future. But what we have taken from our programming in general is that it's very personality driven. We have some DJs that are very good technical DJs and they sound great, you know, no dead air, no hiccups or anything like that, but they don't necessarily garner the same amount of pledge drive donations and streams as it relates to Nielsen and Arbitron than say someone with a larger personality that exists outside of the station as well. Being that we are volunteer based, like most of the stations here at this meeting, everyone's got a main job they're doing. And some of those main jobs tend to be more in the limelight than others. Some of them are customer service. And so they're seeing people more often. So therefore, when a listener comes into the shop of the bike store owner that has a show on the station, there's naturally conversations that spark there, and it's sort of butterfly effects. And our personality driven is consistent with some of the trends that we've been seeing. What we've noticed is that someone who is on regularly, say, if they've been on every Tuesday at 3 p.m. for the past 20 years, they are getting more sort of likes and follows on social media. They're getting more listeners, as we can see by the Nielsen Arbitron ratings, than we are from programs that jump around often. As I mentioned, we've had one program that's been on Tuesday for a very long time, but then we've had other programs that have, say, jump time slots where they started on a Monday, then they moved to a Saturday, and now they're on a Wednesday. And what we found is that the listeners don't necessarily travel with the program. We do have the archiving of our broadcast available, so the fans can still listen back, but we found that the listeners don't travel with the DJ as they move time slots as much as you would think. You know, say we want to boost 7:30 p.m. listening on a Tuesday. We don't want to take the 3 p.m. Friday guy because he has the most listeners and move him over to Tuesday nights. It doesn't necessarily translate that way. And we've also got a lot of DJs who have shows once per week. And then we have DJs that have shows every other week. And so we've also noticed that the shows that have the alternating hosts don't get the same amount of listenership as in that time slot as the ones who are on every single week in their respective time slots. So say there's two people sharing 3 o'clock on Wednesday. What we found is that they don't get as many listeners as compared to a DJ that's on 3 p.m. every Thursday, if that makes any sense. And you might have questions about that I can air at the end. One of the things that we did during COVID in an effort to get new programmers, because we also had a lot of programmers leave during COVID because they either didn't feel safe coming to the station, they either moved out of town. We all know the familiar scenarios. What we started to do is create what we call an offsite programmer. And that's different than a programmer who gets to be live in the studio doing their show. What the offsite programmer is someone who then produces a show offsite using their own equipment and then sends that to us via Dropbox to be implemented into our program rotation by our program assistant. By our production assistant. And what we found is during COVID, it was a great way to get new people into the studio without having what we call super subs, where a show has a new programmer every week, where that time slot, say it's 5 p.m. on a Saturday, has a new programmer every week. So you'll get 4 to 5 different DJs in a week. So instead of bringing current programmers and adding them to new time slots, we found that this offsite programmer procedure allowed for us to get people on the radio who are new and who won't be able to do the in-person training now that COVID has ended and that we've started doing in-person trainings again. Because of some people's schedules, it makes more sense for them to be able to pre-record and put it on the radio. The long-term goal of this offsite programmer is that will be able to fill our midnight, 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. time slots with these pre-recorded programmers, with new people who are coming into the training, and we don't have the availability for a 7 p.m. on a Saturday or a 1 p.m. on a Thursday. This still allows new programmers who are certified or who have been approved for an offsite programmer to get their content on the radio and then not have to show up at 2 a.m. or 4 a.m. This also allows our underwriting department to sell more spots. Those spots wouldn't be priced the same as our 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. like we saw with WMNF, and those rates would be different as we see that the trends show that the listenership's different at 2 a.m. than it is at 2 p.m. That's pretty standard though. And I mentioned the offsite programmers and how that process went about. We basically created a manual, a one-sheet manual for them explaining how the process is going to be laid out. We have someone from the station send you what your underwriting script is and what the promos you have to play 4 days ahead of time for you to have it into us 2 days before your broadcast date. And then we also created a second one sheet that has a how-to, suggested microphones to use, suggested avenues to send it to Dropbox, and suggested audio softwares to use. I believe someone was mentioning Audacity earlier. That's our go-to as well, as it's very universal and it's free. And if you want to add extra effects on there, you can use that VST plugin to add, more high-grade effects to what you're doing. So that's how it works for people who don't want to be live in the studio or can't be live in the studio. But we started our in-person training and certification process. We restarted that very recently, and that's as simple as attending a orientation with myself and a program committee member for an hour. We give you the 411s on station policy, FCC policy. Then we have the folks do a 1 or 2 1-hour trainings with me, so you can learn how the equipment works. And then they have to do 8 hours of shadowing, where they sit in on other DJs who are currently on the air, sit in on 8 hours worth of their programming, so that then the potential programmer can learn the ropes and learn some tips and tricks from folks who have been here for a very long time. Ideally, no bad habits are picked up throughout that process. But then the final part of this training process is they do a one-on-one certification process with me, so that then they can now apply for a program slot to our program committee. In keeping with the trends of music and the things that people want to hear, we engage in listener surveys about every 2 years to figure out if there's genres people want to hear that we're not playing, or what we're playing too much of, and just to get general feedback. We often talk at meetings like this about how to get younger listeners. You bring younger DJs on. And when I say younger, in the scenario that KZFR is in, we're bringing on younger DJs, and our younger is 20s and 30s. We do have a youth-oriented initiative where we try to get folks from various departments at our local high schools to have programs on the air, but we also are shooting for 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds to be on the radio for multiple reasons. One of the main reasons I found is that when KZFR started 32 years ago, almost everyone who started was in their 30s and 40s. Now that we are on for 32 years as a 35-year-old general manager, and throughout my time here since I've been 23, I've been bringing on interns and new programmers that are around my same age. With that type of programming is a youthful voice. And even if they're not playing new music per se, that youthful voice is a nice change for our listeners. One of the new things that we've done at the station is create a 90s hip hop show. It's a 1 hour program that we have on Thursdays. And that 1 hour hip hop show is serving the audience of 30-year-olds who are now young professionals and 40-year-olds who are professionals as well, who grew up listening to that type of music. When they were in college listening to the radio, these are the tunes that were on. So the music of the 90s is considered vintage and classic now. So that's something that we're definitely leaning into. And one of the other notes I'll lead on is when it comes to the music that we do here, we've had a long-standing live music show where bands come in and perform, whether it's a full band setup, whether it's just a singer and a microphone, or just an acoustic guitar and a singer that way. We've been having this live music show be going on for a very long time now. And during COVID, when they weren't able to have live performers, what we were able to do is use audio that we recorded from some of our many concerts that we've had, and then play some of that on the radio. So when we weren't able to have live people in the studio, we were still playing live recordings from KZFR fundraisers. And we're also having that live music time slot be a very big home for local musicians as well. Our local musicians and local bands always see a bump when they come onto some of our when they come onto that live music show. So that's one of the ways we keep it fresh and we keep it new. And that's how we do some of our trainings, both in person and with our offsite programmers. And, you know, the big takeaway is that it's really personality driven here. And that's how we exist at KZFR. Does anyone have any questions? I know I just threw a lot at you real fast.
I have a question, just a request is for when they send out the PowerPoint slides, could you send those remote broadcaster primer sheets as well?
Yeah, cool.
Thank you.
I'll just jump in here on that too and say, if you guys want to send those to me, then I can distribute them to everyone else. I'll put my email in the chat again.
Okay, thank you, Grant. That was a lot in a nutshell. You got through it quickly and efficiently. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Appreciate your time, y'all. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I see one hand from Sharon, if you don't mind.
Oh, okay, sure. Go ahead.
Hey, cool. Thanks for your time. That was excellent. All the presenters have done a really good job today. It's very helpful. So thank you, Ursula and Stephanie, for organizing as well. My question, it was really interesting to me to listen to the certification process that you all have at your station. And I was wondering, because we're kind of doing a similar thing and wanting to get people to train and shadow before we determine if they actually get a radio show. But I'm wondering, you know, after they commit so much time, like at your station, it's at least 8 hours of shadowing on top of all the other stuff. Do they kind of feel like do they expect that they'll get a show at the end of that process? And how often, you know, do they not get a show? And then does that create any, you know, tension for you, or is it just, that's the business?
That is a good question. One of the things that we've found is that we lay out our entire process of how we do it at that new programmer orientation. So ahead of time, they know that they're going to be in for 8 hours. They're going to be in for at least 2 1 hour trainings. And so that new programmer orientation really sort of weeds a lot of people out who don't have the time commitment. A lot of people do just think that they'll come in and they'll have a radio show like next week. And so what we found is that out of, say, 20 people that attend this new programmer orientation, you might have 2 that follow all the way through. And how long it takes those 2 to finish is sometimes 3 months and sometimes it's a year. So we don't really have too much of a problem with compacting the schedule, with having people who are newly certified with nowhere to go, because once they're certified, we also allow them to work as substitutes for other programmers when they go out of town. And so that's also a good way for them to build their chops up and get familiarity with our operating board and our procedures before they put in that program application to be Steve at 2:30 on Wednesdays, for example.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much.
No problem.
We also have a question from Craig.
Shoot, Craig.
can't hear you, Craig.
Are you there, Craig?
Greg?
It's your moment.
You're mute, Craig.
Craig is struggling with technology.
You can type your question in the chat if that works better. I can say it for you.
Okay.
Oh, there you are. Okay.
Am I on now?
Yes.
All right. Yeah, I just had to change my mic. I have a question is for Grant and for all of us really, and that is, like, does anyone know? Because I'm a programmer for a music program and for a public affairs program. What is the data on radio listenership for young listeners? I'm the father of 4 children, 32 years old to 11, and none of them listen to the radio ever. So I wonder, do young people even listen to the radio, and are we barking up the wrong tree trying to get young people to listen to our programming? And in the case like Alan, who has a classical program, or myself, and the station that I'm on that focuses a lot of music program on jazz music, what is the hope of bringing on younger listeners?
So my opinion on getting the younger listeners is they will tune in. Will it be on 90.1 FM on a terrestrial radio? Maybe not, but they'll listen on their phones and they'll listen via the streams when the content they want to hear is right. The person who we just had on the radio from 11:30 to 12:30, he's the example I used of people who are playing, or he's playing 90s hip hop music. And so there are people that follow him on social media that are tuning in just to hear him. And those people that are tuning in are within his age group. So I do feel like there is some hope as well, especially as I see some stations like WTJU out in Charlottesville, they're creating a podcast collective. And so now they're creating sort of a radio grounded product that is existing in like the multimedia world. The basics of podcasting, a successful podcast is following a lot of the same basic principles of a great radio show: good announcing, consistency from show to show, the serialability of the show from program to program as the topics grows. And so I haven't lost all hope yet, but it's really getting them to listen to what they want to hear, and also having the DJs be the curators to something new for them.
Okay, Bruce, did you want to say something real quick? I want to move on here as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask the question, do the music shows have call-ins, or it's pretty much not call-ins?
So at any given time, we have the option to have people call in to be live on the radio, but then we've got a secondary option for people to call in and make requests. The call-in and request is pretty common, but using the same example I just gave with a 35-year-old DJ playing 90s hip hop music, everyone was sitting their request to him on his social media and on his text phone. So there is always that possibility for live call-ins, but the engagement isn't directly through station phones anymore.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Grant, and thank you for sticking around. You're 4 minutes late, so see you next time. See you next time. It's great to see you again. Okay, Indra is up next. And by the way, Grant was with KZFR in Chico, California, where I had a great evening in a hot tub once. So anyway, Indra is from KGNU, one of our longest standing affiliates in Boulder, Denver, Colorado. Thank you, Indra.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And it's really great to hear from so many other stations. And yeah, thanks for having me today. So yeah, my name is Indra Raj. I am the music director here at KGNU. I've been in this position for 5.5 years now, which feels like a lot to me, but is small potatoes compared to the other people who are involved at this station, for many of them for several decades. So there's quite a legacy here. I did put together a very simple PowerPoint presentation, so I will share that, or I'll share my screen so we can all look at that. Let's see here, slideshow. Okay. So we're located in Boulder, Colorado, is our main station and where we were born in 1978. But we broadcast all over the Front Range of Colorado, in Denver, Fort Collins, Colorado Springs, even a bit, and many of the mountain towns as well. We've been on the air for 44 years. Next year will be our 45th anniversary, which is very exciting. And we have a main office and studio in Boulder, where the majority of our operations and staff are. But we also have actually a new studio location and office in Denver at the Buell Media Center, which is really great because, as you may know, this area of the country is growing rapidly, lots of new people coming in. And when they're looking to connect with community radio, a lot of them are in Denver, and it's more convenient for them to try and do shows there or interact with people there. So that's a big part of our mission. And we have had, I think we've been in Denver for almost 15 years now, in terms of having a physical studio there. We have news and music programming weaved together throughout the day. And, you know, part of the original mission, I've been told, and it's rings true today, is to have people involved in the news and also kind of bring them into the music all along one line as much as we can. And there are great things about that and challenges as well, which I'm sure many of you can relate to. And then I just put our mission statement here if you want to read through it. But important things to note is that we're independent, we're non-commercial. We focus on, you know, ideas and music that have been overlooked, suppressed, or underrepresented by other media outlets. And, you know, we are committed to excellence in programming as much as we can be. Oops. So just our music programming at a glance, we have 34 different music shows that go throughout the week. They span all genres and styles, you know, everything from classical to hip hop to reggae to bluegrass to DIY noise music. We have specific genre shows for all of them. And some other folks have mentioned, I think the first presenter said, they put their, they have block programming kind of based so that a genre flows from one show, flows into the next. And the music director previous to me did a really good job in making sure our schedule was sort of similar. So for example, on Monday nights, we start with opera into classical music into modern composition. On Wednesdays, we do all international music, starting with a Celtic music show into general world music, and then into a reggae music show, and so on and so forth. We have over 150 active music volunteer DJs here at KGNU, so a lot of my job is herding cats and making sure people are just have the information they need and the tools they need to be able to do their shows, but we're very fortunate to have such a large active volunteer community within the music department and on the air. You know, there's not a lot of rules about our programming, except we do emphasize to all of our programmers that we are focused on non-commercial, underrepresented artists and sounds from all genres and all over the world. And we really try to emphasize local music here as much as we can. There's a lot of great, diverse local music that happens here in the Front Range, and we really try to bring those people in and highlight those sounds and ideas and people as much as we can. Our DJs have control over what they play. I generally guide people when it comes to successful programming and mission alignment from time to time, but we really are committed to making sure our DJs have autonomy over what they play. And we encourage our hosts to focus on the music during their shows and putting together cohesive and flowing sets of music with thoughtful segues. That's, to me, what distinguishes a radio show, a really great radio set of music, from just throwing on a Spotify playlist. And we really try to emphasize the human curation aspect here at KGNU as one of the values for our listeners. So I'm just going to focus today on some of the things that I think help our programming be successful. And one of those things for me, one of the things that I heard a lot of when I first started this position from volunteers and meeting with them and kind of what they're looking for, is that they really want access to new music that's curated for them, that, you know, they're not just searching for it all by themselves. So I dedicate a lot of time every week to making sure I'm going through digital music submissions and physical music submissions and adding new music to our library every single week. And this is across all genres because, as I said, we have shows across every single genre of music. So it's a lot of work, but it helps maintain our library, keep it fresh. It helps streamline our sound because people are grabbing new music from the same place. It sort of guides people on what music is sort of appropriate for KGNU airwaves. And we have a physical new bin, we call it. But we also, when COVID began and people were less able to come to the studios, I started creating a digital download every week of the new music ads in a weekly newsletter that I provide. And that has been really popular with DJs. It's allowed them to grab that music on their own from home when they're show planning. We did a lot more pre-recorded programming during COVID and have scaled that back as people can do more live shows, but we still have people who pre-record, and that's very helpful for them as well. As I just mentioned, I do a weekly newsletter to my DJs and volunteers. Every Friday, I send out a newsletter with information. What do they need to know that week? What's going on at the station? COVID policies and updates, everything from that to this event is happening or we have a fund drive coming up. Any sort of message that needs to go out, I include in that. And also like links to our concert series, links to the digital download, what our charts look like, DJ tips, all sorts of things like that. It's proved to be a really effective way for me to reach more than 150 people every week with messaging and make sure we're all on the same page as much as possible. I'd say a huge success for us is just having, as I said, a studio in Boulder and in Denver. It allows more people in our area to be involved. They don't have to travel as far to be on the airwaves. So that has been really great. We also have show collectives. So, you know, we have 34 programs and over 150 DJs who are on the air. So we've created collectives for every show that we have. So for example, our bluegrass show on Saturdays, Old Grass, New Grass, we have a collective of about 6 or 7 DJs who DJ that show. For that particular show, it works best to have this, you know, one DJ A does first Saturdays, DJ B does second Saturdays, DJ C does third Saturdays in even months, something like that, so that we have a regular schedule. And that really helps with organization and just making sure everyone has set times and the schedule, we don't miss shows, and we almost always have live hosts, which is the next point. We try to have live hosts whenever possible. As I said earlier, kind of the human curation is really important to us, but human connection is also really important. So much of radio these days is completely pre-recorded. You can't reach the DJ. You can't communicate with who's on the air. So we really want to make sure people can call us in the studio, email us in the studio, and actually, you know, someone will pick up the phone or email you back. People really enjoy that connection. One thing that's been really good for us in recent years is during our fund drives, we try to ask all of our hosts to plan music specials. So maybe they're artist specific, maybe they're a topic, maybe it's just kind of a fun idea that they want to explore more. And we found our listeners really enjoy that. They tune in for the specials, and then they're also getting the fund drive pitching. So, that drives donations during those times, which is really great. We have a really, like so many people have said, our music programming on Saturdays is especially strong. It kind of flows really well throughout the day, and it's something that we like to promote and talk about a lot, especially during our fund drives. And it's really a highlight of our music programming. We also have some great live broadcasts and local partnerships that we've established with venues, other local nonprofits, there's a range of these things that we do, and we just find that that's a really great way for us to connect with more members of our community off of the airways, not just on the airwaves. And during COVID, we had to, like some others have mentioned, change our training process a bit, move a bunch of it online. And that's actually, we learned some things from that worked well. And so now we have a more streamlined process for training our DJs. It used to be a little bit more haphazard because we have a studio in Boulder and in Denver, but now anyone who's doing the training process, they first attend a volunteer orientation generally on Zoom, and then those interested in music DJ training will attend a virtual first session with me, and then from there, people who continue with the process, submit demos and things like that, will go either through the process with me in Boulder or with our program manager in Denver. And so far it's been pretty successful, and we've been able to get a good amount of people on the air, even with COVID restrictions and things like that. So that's all I really prepared for today. Just some kind of things that have helped with my work and in the music department, and I'm very happy to take questions.
Thank you, Indra. I think somebody asked whether you could share a sample of your newsletter.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll make sure that gets sent along.
Yeah, send it to Stephanie and we can make that available.
Yeah.
Sharon, go ahead.
Hey, thanks. That was wonderful. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the dedication to live DJs and the personal connection that really happens there. So we're trying to do that at our station also. Let's see, my question was, when you all do the training, it's kind of a similar question I had last time, but when you all have people go through the orientation and then the training, does it happen that someone doesn't work out, or you don't think that their show is going to be a good fit for your station or something like that? And how do you handle that in that case?
Yeah, we're very open here at KGNU because I think others have expressed that, it's rare that someone actually makes it through all the steps to be on the air. And usually people will kind of weed themselves out if they're not really ready for it. I like to believe I came to KGNU actually with no radio experience, and they still hired me as a music director, which I really appreciate because they knew I had the skills and interest and that I could do it, and they believed in me, and I do, and I can do it. And that's something I really emphasize at the start of any of my trainings, is that if you're here and you have interest, you can do it. So I really try to work with people as much as I can to make sure that anyone at any level, or, ability on the mic, or all these things, that we work with them to kind of train them up. And some people need much longer during those training sessions than others, and some people are ready to go right away. One thing that we have in place is we have a Restless Morning show, which is every morning from 3 to 5:30 on weekdays, and then a bit longer on the weekends. And that's kind of our training ground for new DJs. So some people, they're really not comfortable on the mic, and they need a whole year doing that show every couple weeks to feel comfortable to finally move into something else. And we give them that time. Some people, it's after a few shows, they're ready to go into a more primetime spot. So I really, if there's someone that's not really working out, it's usually them that will kind of remove themselves from the process rather than me having to tell them to do it. And I think that individualized attention to people on their skill sets and where they're at, it may take a little bit more time, but for me, I find I get more good DJs that way. And so it's worth it.
Cool. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I think I've become a little jaded in the past 10 years doing this, and used to be very open, and now I'm realizing I have to, there's just certain things you have to think about the audience. For me, it's been harder to start thinking, okay, we have to think about the audience more than the individual DJ. So that's kind of where we're at right now. And we just have so few time slots, so we can't just let everybody on air now. So that's the difficult part for me, is trying to, figure out how to do that in a peaceful way, not hurt anyone's feelings and that kind of stuff. But thank you very much for your advice. Wonderful presentation. Also, one more quick question, if you don't mind, is about the newsletter. And you said you get out new music to the DJs through that newsletter that they can use and download at home. What system do you use to do that?
So I have a couple wonderful dedicated volunteers here at KGNU who take all of the physical CD submissions and digital ones and transform them into physical CDs and digital files for me every single week. And then I take those files, I put them in a Dropbox folder, and I share it. But I have to say, without those two volunteers, I really don't think I'd be able to do this. And I really had to find one of them was doing this before I even started, and he's very detail oriented and does a great job. You really need to have a structured system for how you're going to enter music and things like that, I think, for this type of thing to be successful. But once it's in place, the returns are like really fantastic, I think.
Indra, do you have an HD channel?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't think so. Honestly, I don't know. I'm sorry.
No problem. Jim, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I'm just curious, and this would be a question to everybody. I remember listening to Kenny Freeman give his brief on Audience Engine a couple of years ago. And I'm just wondering how you all are and how you're doing. And Indra, thanks a lot. It was really fascinating to listen to you. It's really terrific to listen to everybody. How are you utilizing social media to boost audience out there?
That's an interesting question, and interesting that you mentioned that. Actually, currently, KGNU is part of the Pointer Digital Transformation Initiative, which maybe some other stations here were involved in cohort 1 of that. But they are working with community stations like ours to help transform some part of our digital presence. And we have actually honed in on social media and Facebook in particular to see how can we create better posts and engage more people, with the eventual idea that we're bringing them down this audience funnel into becoming a member and a lifetime listener of ours. So, we've tried a bunch of different things and we're still working on it, but I think some of the takeaways from me from just the initial work on this is like, the posts need to be fun and engaging. Like taking a whole big block of text and throwing it on a post is not going to get people engaged with your station. You have to have high quality graphics. I've been experimenting with putting up just some fun questions for people to answer, and those posts have gotten like unbelievably high engagement. And we're just trying to get people connected to us through Facebook so that hopefully they start noticing more of what we're doing. come see a live show that's on our presents calendar, tune into a show that piques their interest, whatever, and then eventually get them to become members. It's a little like hard to track, but that's kind of where we are with that at KGNU specifically.
Sybil, did you want to ask a question before we move on?
Yeah, I put that into the chat. I mean, we look for so many ways to try to share music with people when they weren't able to come in and do a show here. But most of the promoters don't want you to send stuff directly to DJs that they can download themselves. You know, they will say, here's singles, here you can share it, or here we'll put them on our mailing list. But we don't have a private cloud. So if it's out there publicly, or, you have, numerous DJs that can download stuff, I mean, are they okay with that? Or
I have not received any complaints.
but then they know you're doing it.
Well, I don't know if they know, but what they do know is that their music's getting played because of it. And the way I see it in this digital age, if you want a song, you can get it from any source, anywhere.
Mostly
music
true.
is free these days, unfortunately. And so to me, for promoters like, I don't want you to share this, it doesn't make sense to me. It's like, these are DJs who are going to play your music on the air, get it heard by other people, and get it out there. And we really focus, I think that problem, the few times I have encountered it is with larger artists from bigger labels. And we don't really work with that music very much here at KGNU. It's really about underrepresented independent artists who are looking for anyone to listen to their music. So I think that's how we get around it a little bit too.
That'll make a big difference, sure.
Yeah.
Okay,
like
you.
Beyonce people are not going to be like, share this to all your DJs. Like, everyone can hear it anyway, but you know what I mean?
Well, but I mean, but the same is going to be true of, Guided by Voices, they're not a huge like Beyonce, or I mean, there's a big range of artists. I'm just saying, if people want to do this, they might want to be careful about just sending it all out or, putting it out that way. But we should be focusing on local and independent music, and we do. And as you say, it's not a problem for that. And yeah, they're not supposed to share. Well, it's not that it's the public, but they are volunteer staff, but there's just so many volunteers, it's like, okay, so there's 100 people now that have access to all of this music to just download it and have it at home. And yeah, they're instructed to not share it with anyone else, but what if they do put it up somewhere? So anyway, it's not worth the risk for us. So anyway, it is true.
Felix, did you have a question?
So many. Indra, thank you so much. That's really amazing presentation. I really appreciate everything that you mentioned and raised a lot of questions. Quickly, just on social media, we've had, we've just reformatted back in June, and we're now talking the morning, music in the afternoon. And so we've only recently, we used to be only live DJs doing the music for the most part, and they were responsible basically for bringing in their own music. Our own library hadn't grown or changed in far too long, so we're only recently getting doing work to do acquisition. So at some point I would love, Ursula, if anybody else wants to organize a session on music acquisition, because we're really not on a lot of lists. We're only just sort of starting to expand our library, mostly digital. We don't get a lot of physical media at this point, but I'd love to change that. especially when it comes to DJs. I feel like CDs are really handy. On social media, I'll just say that we've also been really trying to spin that up. Generally speaking, when it comes to like building a younger audience, we're trying to do two things at the same time. One is build up our digital presence and make sure that people who can get us online, but also, so we're trying to, the way that vinyl is cool again, we want radio to be cool again. So we're trying to make that, do both of those things at the same time, support people online and make it cool to have a radio again, and educate people around that. Yeah, I really like the idea of the newsletter. We're doing a weekly newsletter. It's not so focused on the music, and the way the music gets imported into our automation system is not necessarily that friendly for all of the jocks to use. So having a way for different people to use it is, I think, really exciting. And I'd love to, again, I just love to hear more about acquisition and reporting. I mean, we use Spinatron. I don't know if labels are watching that or in the same way.
I've heard they are. And some DJ, we don't use Spinatron. We experimented it for a little while, but we actually have an in-house system that we use that works a little bit better for us. But they do pay attention to that and will reach out to programmers sometimes.
Cool.
And I find if you reach out to a label and say, hey, we love this, we want to play it, they'll send you the download code in a heartbeat. So
you write labels directly.
I really recommend. You can directly reach out to artists and labels through that site and get titles that you want. So it's a little time consuming, but sometimes if you reach out to a label, they'll put you on their distribution list from there. And that's how I've gotten a lot of things that I actually want to receive. I receive a lot of digital submissions that I don't want to receive. So I'm sure lots of people can relate to that. So it's nice to have those more targeted ones. And Bandcamp has been a huge resource for me in that way.
Cool. And do you just have kind of a form email that you then customize a little bit depending on the artist? Just like, oh, here's who KGNU is, and we love your art.
Literally, I'm like, hey, I am music director at KGNU in Boulder and Denver. We love this album, or we love your releases. Would it be possible to be added to your distribution list? And, you know, I get a pretty high response rate from that platform, which is great. I think the way Bandcamp is set up to be so like community minded really works with community radio too.
Awesome, Indra. Thank you.
So Stephanie, you got that request for a roundtable about music acquisition?
Yep, I wrote it down.
Okay, I'm going to move us right along. We got 3 more people, and I know it's getting late for folks on the East Coast. So Matt Murphy, you're up next. Can you introduce yourself? And you're on.
Okay, well, thanks for having me on.
Oh, and by the way, Matt Murphy is in WERU in Maine.
Yeah, we're on the coast of Maine, just a little bit of a rural station area. We've kind of a typical program schedule. It's very diverse genres of music, about 3/4 music and 1/4 news and public affairs. I don't know how many genres we have, a lot. And we have about 75 music volunteer music programmers. And our training, our programmer training since COVID particularly has become very individualized. And I think that has worked out for us better than when we'd have a group come to take a class as a group and go through everything as a group. Individually we used to think it was going to be too time consuming and you want to get people together and do the class once for 5 people. It's turned out to be just as efficient and maybe more efficient to do it for 1 or 2 people at a time when they can do it as opposed to at a set time each month that like we were doing before. I think we were missing some people that way. I just want to mention a few tools. I like tools, and these are kind of some randomly, I just kind of looked at our training kit and randomly pulled out a few tools just to mention. And one of them is in this individualized training process that has kind of morphed over the COVID times, is starting with an interview. instead of starting with come to this orientation and anyone can come, and is to have an interview with me, a 15-minute chat. And it's not kind of an interview like a job interview, but it's for me to get to know them a little bit, where they're coming from and what they want to do would fit, and for them to see what the process is. Here you have the process described, and what the opportunities are at any given time. And then they can decide whether they want to invest the time. And they've only invested 15 minutes, and we've only invested 15 minutes just as an icebreaker. We used to have people come to go to an hour-and-a-half training and orientation, and that. What happens now is the orientation happens after the quick get-to-know-you interview. And that's been a helpful thing, that little interview. Part of that interview, and then as we get into orientation, and then specific training on the policies and the performance of doing a show, is to, right from the start, this gets into some of the things that Sybil was talking about. It's getting people's attitude in the right place. And it's a pretty wide, the right place is a pretty big place in community radio. It's not all that narrow, but there are still some guidelines. And one of the things that we try to stress right from the start is, as a volunteer programmer at WERU, you're providing a community service that's really fun to do. It's a lot of work, it's a lot of fun, but our mission isn't about giving you a show. Our mission is about serving the community, and you're a hugely important part in that. But audience first and community services first. And when people start hearing that right from the start, those who just want to do a show just for themselves and could care less about anybody else, they get the message right at the start that this isn't really a good place for them to do that, that they can do something on the internet privately to themselves, and they don't need the radio station to do that. And so audience first and community service first is one little kind of thing that we try to keep them to keep in mind. It's a little tool that talk right from the start is really important. And let's see, another tool that we use is our program advisory committee does, after someone goes through the training and gets certified and is either filling in for someone or getting in a collective on a particular show, is that after 3 months on the air, they get an evaluation by the programming advisory committee. And that evaluation is not on, are they a nice person? Do we like the show? Is on some kind of nuts and bolts things. Do they do the station ID appropriately at the right times? Is their microphone technique good? Can you hear them well enough? Do they announce from the community calendar? Do they promote the website and the app? Do they do their playlist frequently enough? Those kind of things. So that those are the tangibles. And we used to find that our evaluations were very much focused on the intangibles, and we'd have program advisory committee members saying like, oh, I really like that show because they're really fun personality. And somebody else would say, I really don't like that show because I find them irritating. And that really didn't help our programmers that much, by knowing that some members of the committee thought they were fun and nice, and other members thought they were irritating. That doesn't really serve them any. But these, the mechanical parts of the show, the hooks that you hang your coat on, we want those all to be up to snuff, and everyone can do that. And every member of the committee can evaluate people on that. And then in our evaluations, there's also room for the intangibles, about commenting that someone really seems like they connect with listeners well because they're engaging, and those kind of things. So we make the evaluation as objective as possible, with some room for subjective comments. And then the programming committee, they fill out these forms, and then when the committee meets, they discuss these forms before they go to the programmer. And that's when some of the subjective thoughts about the shows come up as well. And the program advisory members, the PAC members, can talk about this. And if there's some major theme, that will get passed on to the programmers as well. And the programmers get the forms that the that the PAC members fill out. And we try to encourage the PAC members that this isn't like a, you know, like a theater, you're not like a theater critic, you're a coach, you're part of a coaching team. So make your comments in a way that you would want them to be made to you, that are in a supportive manner, that we're giving everybody the benefit of the doubt that they're trying to do the best show that they can. And so with that in mind, give them feedback in a way that you think will be helpful, as opposed to getting someone, you know, to snap to attention. They're already paying attention. They get handed this little packet. Of feedback, and we have not had, since we've been doing it this way for 5 years or so, we haven't had a single programmer complain about, you know, who are these people evaluating me and where do they get off. They're usually peers, mostly other programmers, with a few people who kind of graduate from the community advisory board onto the programming committee. But when they're done the right way, they're very appreciated by the programmers. And it's a great way to help them in the first 3 months of getting going. They get feedback from myself and our program and ops manager. They do get that, but it's also good to put in the mix input from experienced peers. And then one last little tool that was kind of like a mini revelation to me, that maybe all of you already do, but when we were trying to transition some of our people back into the studio as COVID, you know, moved along, we were trying to keep it so that there were no two people hanging out in the studio together for more than just a couple of minutes. Pretty typical strategy. And the way we tried to do that was saying, instead of ending your show at, you know, saying your closing comments at the end of the show, as most people do, and then going to the automation computer for underwriting announcements, instead, do your closing comments before your last song, and then play your last song while you get your stuff out of there, and you can fade down. And so then you're not in there as long with the other person. And we did that way back when we, you know, you didn't know how long people could be in the same room together and it was safe, but we were trying that. So we got everyone to do that. And then afterwards, it turns out that it sounds better for us. That there isn't someone at the end of the show trying to fit in everything they want to say and then going over, or looking up at the clock and saying, oops, I'm running out of time for some, you know, like this kind of chowdered kind of delivery. People say their goodbye with plenty of time. They say all the things that they want to say and are supposed to say, and then we'll finish out with this track. And if they want to play the most of the track, they'll get their goodbye done early enough so that they have 3 minutes to play the track instead of 30 seconds to play 30 seconds of a track, then fading out. And the people who tend to press it into other people's shows and are late getting the underwriting and promo announcements on, we have to counsel them on that and advise them on don't do that. And they learn pretty early on that, oh, if I wait till 3 minutes up to play my last song, I don't get to play much of my last song. So people have kind of caught on to that. So those are just a few tools out of our toolkit. I've heard so many great things in this roundtable today. I thought I'd just throw out a few of the things that we do. So any questions? I'm open. No questions. I don't want to answer anybody's questions.
Thank you, Matt. Any questions for Matt? Well, I think they heard you, Matt.
No. I'm just kidding. I'm fine with questions. I was being a wise ass.
I always have a question, but thank you so much, Matt. Always great information coming from you up there in Maine. Thank you so much. My just quick question this time was, who is your programming committee and how do you decide who those folks are?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. It used to be that it was elected by the volunteers, and we did a yearly election for 3 of the 9 seats on it. And then we got to the point, and I actually, when I was first a volunteer, I ran for the PAC and lost. You know, it was competitive, and and then people stopped running for it. We couldn't get anyone to run for it. So the board changed the charter of the committee to say that it is a board member is the chair of the committee, and working with the staff and the to recruit people who programmers who, like, I don't know what other way to put it, seem to have their head on straight about the mission of the station and are good programmers themselves and get it. And the board president approves anyone who the committee wants to bring on. So if I'm on the committee, I can say, hey, so-and-so is really great. Why don't we talk to him? And the chair says, hey, anyone have any problems with this? Would this person be good? And everyone says, yeah, sure. And the board president, though, has to say, yeah, let them on. It's just sort of a checks and balance. But our board presidents have always been good about it. So right now we're about to bring 3 people on. 2 of them, one a programmer, one a former programmer, and one a member of the community advisory board. And their names were put before the committee, and the committee, nobody had any problems with any of these people. And we had 3 open seats. So the chair of the committee is going to approach them and say, hey, here's the charter. Here's what the committee's about. Would you like to join for a 3-year term? So when the committee was voted on, it had a little more clout in the sense of policy. But now it's purely advisory, both to the board and to the staff regarding programming and policy, but it doesn't pass policies.
Bruce, you had a question? Bruce, you there? Bruce disappeared. Okay.
He put his question in the chat, I think.
Oh, okay. Do you see it, Stephanie? I don't see it anymore. I saw him with his hand up, but then he disappeared.
There's a thing in there that says you're not a theater critic, you're a coach. Great advice. That may be what.
Okay. Jim, did you have a quick question before we move on?
Yeah, Matt. This unfortunately isn't a quick question, but you know, how are you? I don't know if you guys get Nielsen ratings. How are you guys in your evaluation process integrating audience and Nielsen ratings and money coming in? I myself served on the program council in New York for 2 years, so I regarded that as a wild experience, end quote. But how are you doing that? I'm just curious from you and other people, how you guys doing that?
We don't use Nielsen ratings. We're not in a big enough market. The closest market is about 30 miles away, which isn't too far. But when the data wasn't any good, it was like they got 6 diaries, you know, and they told us one time, this is your most popular show. And then the next time it didn't even appear on the screen because the sampling is so small. So we haven't bought any in a long time, bought any diaries or reports in a long time. As far as in terms of like what evaluating, we don't evaluate the shows based on how much they bring in during the drives. We just know the shows that particularly have charismatic, the ingredients in a good fundraising show, it seems, are charismatic host, good time of day, and good pitching. And that a good time of day can't be had by everybody. Nice personality everyone can have, but not everyone's really charismatic. And we don't pitch on every show throughout the day. We give people a break on some of the shows that traditionally, some of the strips across. We don't pitch on public affairs anymore because it never did any good. We have promos, but we don't do that live. Music is the horse that pulls our wagon fundraising wise. But we don't use it to evaluate, we don't use it to make programming decisions.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'm going to move us along here. We've got 2 more folks, and thank you very much for those of you who have been so patient to give your presentation. I do want to remind you that the majority of the people that watch these roundtables are people that look at it afterwards. So even if a few people have dropped off, you still will have a lot of people interested in your presentation in the weeks to come. Thank you so much, Matt, as always. It's great to hear what you have to say. Crystal Bunch is next. She's the music director at KZMU in beautiful Moab. Utah,
Yes,
where
thank
we
you so
all
much.
where we all wish we were living.
No, I'm definitely very blessed to be here, but there's definitely, the country's beautiful. So I moved here from the Midwest and I've kind of been all over traveling. So I'm noticing my little video is freezing, but is everyone hearing what I'm saying?
Yes, we hear
Okay.
you.
Awesome, perfect. Well, I am the program and music director here at KZMU. I've been here as a DJ a very short time. I've been a DJ starting in 2019. I started as the music director in 2020. So I've only been here for a couple years as an employee. I do have a simple little slideshow that I would like to share if it's going to pop up here on my screen. I don't know if it's we literally are like right next door to the internet or to the internet provider, and sometimes it's way too slow for what I would like for it to be. So bear with me just a second here. And one more click. Perfect. What you're going to see here as it's deciding to come up as a full slideshow and not just these little bitty things here are our new branding. This year was our 30th year as KZMU. We were founded in April of 1992. This thing is giving me issues, of course. So let me just, you're seeing this part, right?
Yeah, it looks like it's loading.
Okay.
Right now we're seeing a blank screen, but hopefully it's loading.
Oh, yeah. Let me just stop the share and go back in. But anyway, KZMU was founded in 1992. We have 7 trustees. We have 74 music DJs. We have 11 public affairs hosts. Oh, look, there it is. It's finally coming around on my side. But we started off in a single wide National Park Service trailer that was up here on the site where we are now. In 2001, we had our studio that we're currently in completed, and it's next to the actual national park where the trailer was sitting. When we got rid of, when we got rid of the trailer, we added solar panels there. So we are completely, most generally, the majority of what we have is ran by solar at this point. We do have some other equipment on our tower that runs off of it now. So there's a little bit of it that we're paying more so.
Did we lose you there?
Crystal, we lost your audio.
Crystal, if you stop your video, often the audio kicks back in if you have a bandwidth issue.
Yeah.
That works.
Well,
okay, we hear you again.
Perfect. Yeah, I don't know what is happening because I've had perfect internet this whole time and now it's my time to speak and it's messing up. But anyway, so as far as programming, we are Utah's only all volunteer air crew radio station. Again, we have 74 music DJs and 11 public affairs hosts. We have the longest running children's programming in the state. We have both music and talk radio programming, and we have live programming daily from 9 to 11 p.m. So I'm going to switch over here to this next slide. Hopefully it will load here. That shows the schedule, but I will send all of this to Stephanie so you guys can run through it. We have programming that is Indigenous programming. We have Spanish speaking programming. We have reggae shows. We have Culture Blast, which is a world programming show. So we have programming for across the world and a lot of diversity. That's one of the things that we really take pride in, is making sure that we have diversity on the air. Other than that, what makes our radio programming successful? We have a DJ orientation and training schedule very similar to KZFR. They come in for orientation. We do 2 different shadowings in the production room where I'm watching them and training them on a production board, which is basically identical to what we use in the studio. Those usually run between an hour to 2 hours, depending on how confident they are. After that, we do 2 to 3 2-hour segments for shadow actual studio. And then once they've shadowed, we go into them doing their first show and I'm present as that's happening. So from 10 to 12 hours, I would suggest total time to get them actually on air. And it could be longer if they need to do a longer amount. I'm not going to just send them in there if they're not comfortable. So making sure they're comfortable. Another thing that makes the programming successful is the time of day when we're placing a show. We obviously want to make sure and be mindful of the shows that are coming before or after the show is starting. Like we don't want that. I always make the example of using the language, a train wreck. We want them to kind of flow very well. So that is a lot of what I do as far as the shows from hour to hour. Our music shows are 2 hours long. We have very few that are 3 hours long. But then also if there's a shared spot, just being mindful of if 1 week we're going to have this certain genre, making sure that the next week it's going to be a show where if our listeners at 2 p.m. listen on a Thursday, that the next Thursday at 2 p.m. they're not blindsided by something completely different. So just making sure that that's happening. And then also allowing the DJs to bring their own creativity to the show. Obviously, you have to limit them according to FCC guidelines, station policies, but just allowing them to be themselves and bring that to the station. I always have to ask myself, and I have the DJs ask themselves, does your show fit our community and our listeners? Because that's really important, because at the end of the day, we are a community station. We're a listener supported station. So if what we're doing isn't benefiting or fitting for our community, then that needs to be adjusted. I think it's important to have ongoing support for our DJs. We constantly, again, with 74 DJs, I'm constantly getting text messages and emails from those DJs, and I take pride in being able to be reachable and responsible and being able to contact them or providing other numbers where they can get support if they need it, if I'm not available. And then we have just started recently providing mandatory FCC station and legal policy refreshers, making that to where the DJs have to attend at least one per year, just to kind of refresh their memories about what should be happening and not happening. I think we get really comfortable in the booth, and it's nice to be reminded really what those little things are and aren't that you should be doing. And then the next one is just letting the DJs know like that they are appreciated. I think that that's one of the most important parts for me is making sure that they're aware that they're appreciated. The next slide, oh, there it is. I hope you guys can see this one. Oh, let's go back because it is monetizing and raising money. Our shows, we encourage the DJs, and if you can see this slide, to do their own merch for their shows if they have that capacity. So on this side, you're seeing a few of our shows. The first one, far left, is Cocopelli Coffee House. We have John Morning, which is our reggae show. DJ Danger is one of our kid DJs. And I Can Hear Clearly Now, which is also one of our shows. So again, we encourage the DJs to do show-specific merchandise all year, but mainly during our pledge drives. Again, during pledge drives, curating a show that's relatable to the listener. You know, we've all had that time where we're sitting in a car and we don't want to turn off the radio to come inside. And that's what we want our DJs to be able to bring to people. And then also just creating, again, unique spunky shows that people are like, what am I listening to? I want to call and pledge to this. Those type of shows. Other ways that we monetize in addition to pledge drives and show specific merch are underwriting, live remotes. We have some DJs that have listeners that will do matching pledges for the pledge drives. We do a radio play festival that we put on and produce. We have Job Brunch, which is we take our job morning reggae DJs into one of our local restaurants and they DJ live as we're simulcasting from that location. And then we participate in the local festivals, the street festival, the free concert series and things like that. It's a lot of information really quickly, but this last slide is my contact information directly if you want to jot that down real quick before I make this go away. And then of course everyone else, Ursula and Stephanie have my contact information too, and you're more than welcome to share it if somebody needs that. So a little bit of technical difficulties, but I hope that we made it through, and some of that was something that you guys could see and was worth viewing. So if you have any questions, I can definitely answer them or try to answer them.
That's great. Thank you so much, Crystal. It's really exciting to hear what you're doing. I'm kind of blown away by all this information that's coming to this roundtable. I think Robert had several questions for you. Robert, do you want to ask the questions?
You're mute,
Come on.
Robert.
There we go.
There you are.
All right. I was wondering if you mentioned that the DJs have to you encourage them to do their own promotions, like merchandise and other things like that. Is there someone on staff who actually helps them with that? Because a lot of them don't want to do it or don't know how.
No, I do it, and we have a tutorial that we have typed up. We use a company called Bonfire, which is a fundraising company, and they basically bring their artwork to me, or they follow the tutorial. We upload the artwork to Bonfire. Through Bonfire, you select the merchandise that you want to put that artwork on, and then you start a campaign. And you run we always run our campaigns most generally coinciding with our pledge drive. And then basically you run the campaign for your set amount of time. And then at the end of that, the drop ship place prints and sends it all out. So I'm the one and our general manager does a lot of that too. We coordinate that with the DJs and help them through that process. But now we've been doing it for a few years that a lot of the DJs are very familiar with the process. So they're also helping me.
And that'll help.
Yeah.
So the merch is being produced on demand, not in advance of the demand.
Correct.
Yeah, that's
Correct.
great. That's great. That's clutch.
Yeah. Yeah, because we don't have any out-of-pocket expense. The DJs don't have an out-of-pocket expense. The main thing I would say, if you ever go that route, just make sure that, like for us, we sell our t-shirts at X amount, and obviously through Bonfire, we want to make sure they're the same amount, so that way our prices aren't all over the place. But other than that, it seems to work really well. I mean, we brought in almost $3,000 in merch sales for our job morning show, just because we had a piece of artwork. So
what is the best merchandise for that kind of merchandise for that?
It's very seasonal, and they also have a lot of different merchandise. So we usually do sweatshirts, t-shirts, or tank tops, depending on the season. But also, I mean, there's mugs, there's tote bags, but I kind of discourage anything other than the sweatshirts and the t-shirts, just because it is like a drop ship place. Once you start getting into this other things, like I had a really rad tote bag that somebody did, but we made $2 when they sold it. So at that point, all the work that goes into it isn't worth the $2. So you make your bigger profits on the other things.
So does Bonfire do the fulfillment? Do they send it to the client, to the donor, or do they send it to you?
They send it directly to the donor.
Oh.
And then, and after it's printed and sent, then they just send us a check.
Ah, love it.
Yeah, it's so, and I would love to like share that with anybody who would like that info because again, I apologize if my slideshow didn't come up and work, but the graphics that were on there, I think we had 12 or 15 shows had their own merch last time. And two, as you guys know, doing pledge drives, you're buying all of this merch in hopes that you're going to sell it. But with this, we can buy less actual KZMU merch because we have all of the show merch.
Yeah.
So it's less money out of pocket for us too.
Yeah. And Robert, I think you had a question about support for overnight producers.
Yeah, but that's not one that has to be answered in
Okay.
this.
Okay,
But
great.
the whole idea is that often with stations, the overnights, nobody gets in touch with them on things. And
Yeah.
I mean, who wants to get up at 2 a.m.?
No, we don't. We have our last program ends at 11. So we have 9 a.m. to 11 is live. And then after 11, like usually one of us is up or has our phone on. So one of us, I mean, we have an emergency contact list with board members and staff. We have 5 staff. So there's always somebody that's going to answer the phone at 11 if they have an issue, but it stops at 11. Yeah.
Yeah, but because often they're separated from management and feel like they're separated from the station. I just wanted to know.
Yeah. Our late night DJs love being up here by themselves because they just go in their little box and do their show and they love it.
Mm.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Crystal. And
you're welcome.
And really appreciate your patience too in going second to the last. And now we're going to go to the last person, Michael White, who got kind of added at the last minute and has been very, very patient. Michael is a Midwesterner, along with us, with yours truly here. He's a neighbor over in Lansing. No, I always want to say Lansing, but it's Crosse, Wisconsin. And he is, again, a music producer now, not a manager. So we're going to end with a music producer. Michael does a show that's syndicated by Pacifica called Baroque and Beyond. I think you originally were connected to WDRT, but then actually moved very quickly to becoming an independent producer.
Well, I'll tell the whole story. So
Okay.
I'm going to share for just a second, if I may. I'm going to try to share. Where did it go? Okay, here it is. Desktop one. This is the one I want. And I'm going to there. You can see, I hope, the screen. These are the stations now downloading Baroque and Beyond. So there's about 20 of them across the country. And I also have a webpage, www.bnbradio.com, where you can download 2 years of MP3 versions of the show and playlists. And the reason I emphasize that is every once in a while you guys get a request. We need to know exactly what you played on such and such a day because we're being audited. The last one to do it was one of the Canadian stations. And I have 90% of the playlists up at the webpage. But as you can see, I get a fair number of downloads across the country. So the story, by the way, Crystal, I'm sort of a neighbor. My parents were driving back to see my father in Salt Lake City, and they got to the city of the Golden Spike, Ogden, Utah, and she said, "Find a hospital quick." I was born in Ogden, Utah, and fortunately she'd been on phenobarb for about 6 weeks after my grandfather's death because I was born 2 months premature. I am retired military. I've moved 30 times. I've lived in 10 states and 2 foreign countries. I worked for Mayo. I am a doctor. I do have guns, but I was also the Green Party candidate for governor in Wisconsin in 2018. So I don't fit neatly into any, you remember, Sybil, you remember me. Okay. I don't fit neatly in any box. The nature of Baroque and Beyond is kind of an accident. WDRT was set up by 2 Linux geeks, friends of mine. And they gave a presentation at the Linux Geek Club about how they were setting up a community radio station with free open source software. And I said, "Gee, that's different than when I was a DJ in college." And they got all excited and spent 2 years twisting my arm until I agreed to do a radio show. I was going to do a folk show. They said, "We got folkies coming out of our ears. How about classical?" So I said, "Okay, I'll do classical." I have a few dozen, maybe 100 classical music CDs. I don't think this is going to go very far. After a month, they said, well, we're not going to produce your show. We got somebody here local, but you still have to produce it. Wait a minute, if you're not airing the show, why am I going to produce it? Because we gave you to KPVL in Postville, and you've been on the air in Iowa for a month. That led to KHOI. Ursula, wasn't I one of the very first ones you broadcast?
Yeah, you were. You were right at the
Yeah.
beginning. Yeah.
Right at the very beginning. And
Yeah,
so
we
I've been
think,
doing
we
it.
feel like you belong to us, but
I agree. I've done promos and will continue to do promos, but it's now almost 10 years. I produce it in a studio in my house. I have one room dedicated to the radio show. I now have about, I don't know, 2,000-3,000 CDs. By the way, those are all purchased out of pocket. And now that I know you can write to people and get free CDs, wow, that's a whole new thing. But I will tell you that you will hear music on my show that you won't hear on most classical music radio shows. By sheer accident, shortly after I started, I came across a CD, Baroque, Bohemia and Beyond, and I wound up buying that whole series. And that led to all the classical music publishers that are in Europe. So 80 to 90% of the music that I produce is classical music produced by small orchestras in Europe, from Prague, Pardubice, Dresden, places you probably haven't heard of, and conductors you probably haven't heard of. So a couple of comments, one of which is I don't get that much feedback, but if there's anything I can put in the show in terms of commentary that's helpful for any of the stations, let me know. I have done promos for a few of the other stations in the past. I use Audacity. I tend to keep my comments relatively short, although I've started doing more historical comments about the history behind some of the music, etc. And it's all music that is in my personal collection that I've augmented over the last couple of years. I always finish with music, so there's no verbiage by me at the very end. I'm amenable to all kinds of feedback and changes if people want to share things with me. I'd love to see all of you doing it. It will be 10 years in production as of middle of next month. I plan on doing it for the indefinite future. It's a hobby, and in 10 years, I haven't missed a week. What's unique about it is most classical radio programs play fragments of things, like Sirius XM, for example. Very rarely do they play a whole symphony. I play the whole piece. I've not yet had a complaint about doing that. I also play chamber music and duets and trios and things you might not hear on other radio stations. I have improved my technique over the years. Originally, I was producing under less than optimal conditions. I'm having fun doing it. And with that, I will stop and ask questions or invite questions.
It's great. It's great to have Michael on kind of as the last word, because Michael, you really are representing a huge part of our network that tends to fly under the radar, which is the independent producers. We have hundreds of independent producers that feel that they're part of the network and contribute incredibly and have much fewer options for resources than the radio stations, and yet do really excellent programming. So, thank you for being here as well, because you really are speaking for, a huge amount of people in the network that really add tremendous value to.
Well, thank
who
you.
we are.
I was a little intimidated the long everybody else went on, all the various things that they do on a G. I didn't know that, but Jim's got a question.
Now you know what you're dealing with.
Yeah.
Jim, did you have a question for Michael?
Yeah, I do. I was trained as a classical musician as a kid, Mike. So I've always loved classical music. And I, years ago, interviewed for TV a guy named Joseph Horowitz, who wrote a book, Classical Music in America, A History of Its Rise and Fall. And one of the things I got from talking to him was it sort of blew my mind that Arturo Toscanini used to have millions of people listening to him in the 30s. So we're dealing with a whole different phenomenon nowadays. And I was wondering what you think would be the characteristics. Let's say one wanted to create a 24/7 virtual classical music stream, and I'm also 100% in favor of playing complete intact pieces, not fragmenting them. Because when I've talked to people at WQXR, as you know, the marketing of classical music in the past 30 years has been essentially, people can only listen to like 10, 15 minutes. They can only listen to movements. They can't listen to the whole piece. So what do you think would be an interesting way? What would you imagine would be a way to really do a kick-ass kind of 24/7 classical music stream that has a lot of curators? Yeah, go on, babe. I'm waiting for you. Go on.
No, I'm just you're just pushing a button. So I put my email in the chat before, and Ursula's got it, but we should follow up on that because that's the direction I want to go in. And you pushed a button that I had forgotten about. So among the things that I do, which are too many, I'm a president of La Crosse County Medical Society. I'm on the board of the State Medical Society. I'm still part-time practicing. I'm on the artistic committee for the La Crosse Symphony Orchestra and used to be on the board of directors, and in fact was one of the underwriters for some of the stuff we did. One of the things we did was we brought in Magic Circle Mime, and we had mime performers doing stuff on stage with Peter and the Wolf. The problem with La Crosse Symphony Orchestra is that the average age is like the average age of the public radio listeners. We're getting older. If you guys haven't noticed, I'm an old white guy. When I told my kids I was producing a classical music radio show, one of my kids said, "Dad, you mean like the Stones and the Bee Gees?"
Wow.
No.
Wow.
Yeah. But one of the things that I'm trying to do, I've been paying out of pocket for an internet geek to build a database for me. I have a database which is still in progress of all of the small community orchestras in the world. That's the goal. We have the United States, we have Canada, we have a lot of Europe. What I'm going to ask your help for, everybody on the call and everybody who looks at it later, is I want a contact point at your local community symphony orchestra. Because what I would really like to do, I've played the La Crosse Symphony a number of times. I want to play all of the community orchestras around the world and feature them at one time or another on the radio show. I am tired of the
St. Martin in the Field.
Videos. Well, St. Martin in the Fields or the chamber orchestra of Pardubice. Most people don't know where Pardubice is. And I've actually made some tentative contacts overseas to do some interviews on the station of some of those composers and conductors, et cetera. And I've made a proposal to the La Crosse Symphony. Let's put together a chamber concert. I'll underwrite it. Let's bring somebody in and we'll record it and put it on the air and get some revenue for the symphony. One of the things I would like to see happen for classical music, get your local artists to produce something. We put it on the air, we record it, you have it available to put up on CD Baby or wherever, and you can download it and you make the money because I don't care. I just want to get people to hear their local station. When we produce music, the symphony produces music that involves the students from the local symphony, the students from the high schools. That's the best attended concert of the year.
Yeah.
So how do we support our local community? We do community radio, community classical music, and we put it on the air. I'll shut up. Go ahead.
Well, I've always felt that we should go kiss ass at Juilliard, which is a local community school in New York City, okay? And has lots of talented young people. And in terms of, yes, I agree with you going into these little, because I'm a big Deutsche Grammophon freak. So I know all these kind of orchestras you were talking about in Europe. This is, I think it's one of the many ways that we could add value. I'm talking now from the point of view of Pacifica, because Pacifica used to actually integrate classical music in its early years completely. And I just think it's just one genre among many that has to be exploited. But it's really exciting. This has been a mind-blowing day to listen to you guys. And I should note that we're going to follow this up on the 23rd because obviously having everybody rap and talk about this, I could see it'd be really fun to have people just simply free from presentations. And let's talk. Let's brainstorm. And I thank Ursula for doing this because it just gave me so many ideas listening to you guys talk about this stuff. It really is exciting. And
So
we
I
haven't,
wanted to-
we've only scratched the surface. We've scratched the surface.
I want to toot Sybil's horn for a moment because she put it in the chat. She pointed out, she's about to get off, I think, that they're doing
Oh, go ahead.
doing some recording sessions of their local people. And I think that that's cool. I think that's the model we ought to be following. And I'm happy to be interviewed on anybody's station. I'm happy to even make, I won't volunteer to do too many times, make journeys to various stations to do on-air stuff. But I'm having this, I'm a volunteer. This is something I do that turned into a passion. Instead of 200 CDs, now I have somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000. And I have a dedicated, I get on my webpage, I get downloads from all around the world.
I have a feeling there are other guys like you all over the damn place. We just have to figure out who they are and stitch them together.
Yeah. Thanks, Sybil. We need to talk. Any other questions, comments? Tomatoes, peaches, watermelons, whatever.
Well, I just, Michael, you've been a real asset to KHOI. And even though we kind of consider you a local producer because you're kind of part of the family, even though you're not really, but you've really created a cornerstone for the classical music department at KHOI. So just really want to acknowledge your work.
Well, thank
you.
you.
And also, it's absolutely true. Your willingness to come on anytime and help support fund drives, even though you don't really get any monetary benefits from the show at all. And it's really, really, really commendable. Thank you.
Well, thank you to all the people out there doing what you do, because you all have mostly invisible jobs.
Yeah.
But public radio doesn't, local community radio doesn't exist without you.
Yeah.
Well, I'll probably want to brainstorm with Ursula, but everybody else, like, how do we move from here? Because I personally think this music issue has to be further developed and further refined and further gotten into. There's so many things that came up today. And we were, as I say, there's nobody from any of the Pacifica stations on, and I would have been interested in hear them. But I can certainly see in a future date, it might be good to just have people get together and talk, and sit there and share ideas about what the hell to do. Because I'm going to definitely want to hear this and write it down and think about what I'm listening to. And I want to thank Ursula for giving the opportunity to put everybody together. It was just terrific. Everybody was inspiring and positive. It was terrific to listen to all you all guys.
Thank you, Jim. Well, this was your idea, so
well, it is. Yeah, it is my idea. But but what kills me is that like no one in Pacifica has done this kind of stuff, putting all the music producers together. And we're not even putting. These are all folks from all those affiliates, and they're all doing incredibly creative stuff, as I figured they would be.
So
I think I want to learn some more, and I want the objective of this is to really have it spill over and help everybody else. Really help everybody else in their local activities, to learn from each other, get their shit better together, frankly. That's my approach.
Thanks, Sharon. So for everybody else, I'm going to repeat what I said. If I get contacts from your local, even music teachers, if we can find a way to, for example, we've had guests that we have a competition, they have a competition across the Rising Stars, and they get high school and college students to compete to play a solo instrument for a concerto. And I've made the offer a couple of times, let's record this young artist and put him on the air. And so far, nobody seems to take that seriously. But one of the things Pacifica could do, you're doing it for pop music, you're doing it for Latin music, you're doing it for other kinds of music. We could start featuring a symphony orchestra from Louisville, from Dubuque, from Ames, from Tempe, Arizona, and put them on the air and then talk it up before it's aired. And that would get more attention for the station and for the music, and hopefully build classical music. I just heard the Harp Twins, a couple of young ladies that are classically trained, and now with electric harps play rock and roll and jazz and similar things, and they're awesome. Okay, let's get some of that innovative way of producing pieces of classical music and put that on the air. That'll bring in some of the younger listeners.
Right. Well, I want to share, I was doing a morning show slot a few weeks ago, and I brought on a Generation Z kid who had graduated from high school in New York City. She's spent the past 3 years doing podcasts. So her whole thing was on oral production. And she got on the air and she talked about what the greatest hit for her age group was. The number one hit. We said, okay, why don't you do a segment? Let's hear that segment. And what amazed me was the reaction of people our age to her being on the air. It was like, wow. It was like amazing. It was sort of funny. It was like they were actually saying stuff that I remember I was berated about in the 60s. So what I sort of feel is that it's really important to set up like something we did here in New York, which we weren't able to exploit as much as we should have. But, you know, we had a kid come in and wanted to do a talent show for teenagers. And the development director at the time was sort of a little rigid, so she sort of rebuffed the person. It turned out one of the board members was in the station. He grabbed her. He organized this talent show. 2 months later, there are 50 kids from all over the city of New York, from the public schools, from the private schools, from the specialized high schools, and they were performing downstairs. And I personally said, you know, you guys should replace us. You guys should be the ones who take us, you know, come in. We need your energy. And so, because I know what the statistics are, they don't listen to terrestrial radio. We all know that. They're listening to devices. So we've got to figure out a way to capture that energy and let them do their thing. And working with us older farts here. But have them really work together. We work together and help them, you know, mentor them and let them do their thing. You know, and that I think, and the classical music thing, I think there's a solution to that too. We just have to figure our ways out to put our noggins together and come out with some good solutions. Thanks. It was just really terrific, and I look forward to talking to you all again. Thank you so much.
Yeah. You know, Jet, are you on here? Yeah, I think, anyway, okay, sorry, I'm just a little organization snafu in my head. So, you know, topics, I mean, you know, Jim, you're saying, where do we go next? I just, you know, I made notes on certain topics that people seem to really kind of, where the rubber seemed to hit the road a lot. And one of them was on social media. One was on being current and, you know, youth, training, support and evaluation, classical music, and music acquisition. Those are things that kind of jumped out to me. And if there's things that other of those of you on here can think of that I've missed, let me know. But I'm thinking, you know, I mean, we certainly are always open to free form conversations on the round table. It doesn't have to be a lot of presentations. So, you know, we can always come back and revisit these topics. And I know that everybody's very, very busy in their lives. And I appreciate how many of you showed up for today. But we could always, you know, try these as free form conversations and see how many people we can bring to, you know, to bring to that table and try it out. Does that make sense? Any comments on that? We're always trying to figure out what really works for people.
Well, one of the things we did at Grassroots Radio, the time I came down to Ames, was a presentation on how to put a show together. And if we could do some things like that, that would be useful for all of the non-live producers, for all of your shows, that might be useful for all of the stations. Pass.
Okay. Thank you. I added that.
Well, I have allocated a time slot on KPTFX. I think Otis is here, and I would want that to be, I'm going to send it out to the system, to the PDs, and I'm going to want that to be more focused in on, you know, solutions. How do we synthesize all this information, you know, and
yeah,
and what are the best practices, you know, because I've heard a lot from different folks today about the best practices. And it's clear that the stations, at least in the Pacifica system, that do very well are the stations that have had close relationships with bars and venues with live rock bands or live bands over the years. And they had these guys on the air. I'm thinking about Texas in particular. And they just grew together. And so that has led to financial support. And at the same time, there must be other creative ways with the new digital revolutionary technology to think of things that we can't even imagine yet. And that's the sort of stuff I want to do. And this is just great to have other people here, people doing positive things and reinforce and get people out of their doldrums in different situations. It's great to break down isolation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and you know, Michael, I really did relate to what you were saying. I mean, Ames has a wonderful orchestra, and KHOI, you know, records their shows, and yeah, I hear what you're saying. I don't know why more people haven't thought of that. You're absolutely right.
You're
Yeah.
wonderful, Ursula. And
Yeah.
and it's really, I want to thank Ursula for getting me in. One last story. She got me up on the air there. And I was initially sending things up to Dropbox, and they were downloading it for Dropbox. But the night before their first morning on the air, I was at a Gilbert and Sullivan opera, and I got this panicky phone call. We can't download your show. Will you upload it to AudioPort? And I said, what's AudioPort? And Ursula talked to me about re-uploading my show to get it to them for the first time they were putting me on the air. And at that time, as you may or may not know, their tower was remote, and they had to go out to the tower and manually load it to put it on the air. And she was doing it in all kinds of really crappy weather. So I owe you a big debt of gratitude.
This is true. Okay, well, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Any other comments? I know this has been a 3-hour meeting, so.
Ursula, this is Heather. Can you
Hey,
hear me?
Heather. Hi.
Hi. So just so everybody knows, I've been listening to this. I live in Atlanta, but I'm driving to Birmingham for an event, right? So I was listening to it on the road all the time. It was just wonderful. So Ursula and Jim as well, and all the, I don't know who is still on the call, but I was so impressed with the comments, excuse me, from all of you. It was just so impressive. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Did you guys just see that animal that crawled into my screen? Anyway, that was wild. Anyway, thank you, Heather, for being with us. I saw you join us, and I was really happy to see your phone number show up.
Well, I kept getting knocked off as I was driving, and I would stop and get back on again. But it was just so incredibly impressive, and I look forward to listening to the recording of it as well. It's just what I'm saying about being impressive is just all the vast array of ideas that people have and what they're doing in terms of bringing in the community and so forth. So thank you to all of you, really, for this great work. So great.
Thank you. Thank you. And I
Thanks.
also saw that numerous people kind of made connections with each other in the chat. So, you know, that's great. It's great to see that more folks are finding each other and, you know, have conversations they want to continue with each other individually. It's really great to see. Okay, any final words? Otis, anything you need to say? Ken, Gail, I'm trying to think who else. Patrick, anybody who has not spoken, any comments?
This is James.
Hi, James. Hi, James. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, no worry. Just for those who don't know, I'm the putative treasurer of Pacific Foundation. Been listening. It's wonderful. Don't have anything to add, but thank you all. Thank you, Ursula, especially. And that's it. Just want to let you know I'm listening and impressed. Thanks.
Thank you so much for joining us, James. And I have to say, James is just a tremendous help to the affiliate network, our network office. I always really appreciate the support that James gives us in hard times at Pacifica, right? It's great to have people pulling for you and helping you out. So thank you, James, for everything you do.
Well, thank you for that. And right back at you, Ursula. You do a great job. You really do.
Thank you, James.
Ditto on that. And I was just curious if Otis or Ken or other people had any comments. I want to put you on the spot, Otis.
Otis, silence is consent, you know.
I had a different impression of what this would be like.
I have too many buttons to push. Since I am the captain of irony in Pacifica, I heard so many great ideas. I think it will be very difficult for Pacifica to ignore all of them.
Okay.
Oh, that's pithy. What about you, Ken? Ken, you had a comment?
I had a comment. I had a different impression of what this would be like than what it actually was. So it took me a bit to realize what I was listening to, what I was going to be listening to.
Okay, what did you expect?
Incorporating music in different ways in different kinds of shows.
Oh, okay, great topic, Stephanie. Write that down.
Yeah, part of it is to get the music shows, to help all the music shows throughout the whole system in both the affiliates and the network. And that's why I want to keep on pushing this. And I guess Michael must have been listening to HMS Pinafore. Is that what you were listening to that day with your Gilbert and Sullivan opera? Or am I wrong?
No, I think that's what it was. It was the Pinafore.
Yeah, Pinafore always can get you into certain heads.
Well, it was fun, but I had to leave halfway through it to go home and re-upload the music. I only got to hear half of it.
Well,
okay, well,
Thank
I
you.
think we're at the end of our rope here, and I really appreciate everybody and their comments, questions, and
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, there's all of this could be, you know, really broken down and discussed in detail. And you know, send us your comments, what you would like these roundtables to be, and we'll certainly add that to the schedule, right, Stephanie? And I see Bella is there. You see Bella with Stephanie? She's our office dog.
Bella came to work today.
Oh,
Good for you.
oh, a long-haired
Hey, Bella.
dachshund. Great.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, we love more ideas. Please send them.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's great to collaborate with you guys, and it was fun, and we'll do it again. And, you know, as I say, the 23rd, I want to do something where we're just going to simply talk about implementation. All right. Well, thanks a million.
Thank you. Thank you,
Yeah.
everybody. Take care.
See ya.
See you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye all. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.